Snow fell with a silent authority over the carcass of Winterfell, each flake drifting like ash through the moon-bleached sky. The great castle lay broken. A jagged skeleton of stone ramparts rimed in frost. Windows shattered and blackened, banners frozen stiff against charred beams. Where once hearth fires had glowed within every hall, only blue-white witchlight now danced, cast by the smoldering eye flames of the dead who prowled the ruins. Steel rang no more. The forge lay silent. The god's wood, sacred for 10,000 years, was a crystal forest of frozen sap, its red leaves trapped beneath new ice. And in that awful stillness, Sansa Stark crept through the snowdrifts, the bite of the wind carving tears from her eyes, before grief could summon them. Her gloves, fur-lined once, now soaked through, stuck to the hilt of the little dagger she'd taken from a fallen soldier. Its edge was dull, nicked, useless against the obsidian bones of the enemy. Yet she gripped it as though it held the memory of safety. Ahead, rays of pale moonlight slivered through the collapsed roof of the great hall. Between the broken ribs of oak beams, she spotted movement. Long shadows, many, shifting with a mindless single purpose. She froze, heart hammering. The dead were feasting on the last warmth left in Winterfell, the scattered bodies of her people whose throats had not yet cooled. With every shuddering breath she feared the sound would carry, feared the turning of those impossible cerulean eyes upon her. She pressed her fist hard against her mouth and tasted blood where her teeth broke the skin. Somewhere beneath the floorstones a distant roar echoed, hollow and thunderous. The cry of a dragon, or what remained of one. Drogon's grief had shaken the night earlier, though none knew if the great beast survived the fray beyond the walls. Sansa's mind fled from the image, black scales riven by ice spears. A burning throat clogged in frost. She forced herself onward, moving between toppled benches, past a shattered suit of armor that still kneeled as it had when Ser Jorah's heart ceased beneath it. The torch she carried sputtered, its flame a dying ember. She had to reach the crypts, the promised refuge, though even the old kings and queens could not rest there now. Near the dais lay Brienne of Tarth, half encased in ice where a white walker's blade had met her shield. She knelt still, eternal, vigilant, her blue eyes empty of life, but glittering with unnatural fire. Sansa's breath caught. The contagion of death had spared no oath, no badge of honor. The living and the noble were dragged into the same silent legion. As she skirted the giant woman, snow cracked under her heel, brittle as thin glass. Brienne's head jerked. The dead knight rose with ponderous, predatory grace, joints popping like branches in winter. Sansa turned and ran, silent screams locked behind clenched teeth. A broken archway gaped ahead, beyond it, the stairs to the crypts. She darted through, boots sliding. Behind her, steel scraped stone. Then another sound, heavier, plate armor meeting with a crunch of bone. Sansa risked a glance. Jaime Lannister's golden hand glimmered in the dim witchlight. He had been taken too, arisen beside the towering Brienne as if tied to her fate in death. Their once bright blades trailed frost, edges glimmering with wafer-thin ice. Sansa stumbled down the stairway, and darkness swallowed her. She plunged deeper, heart churning, ears ringing with phantom bells from King's Landing far to the south. A city that days ago had seemed a world away. At the foot of the stairs, torches blazed. Arya stood beside them, cheeks streaked in soot and tears, her hair matted to her scalp with blood. She pressed a finger to her lips, the universal command for silence. Then she guided Sansa through narrow tunnels between ancient coffins, past the broken tomb of their father, whose stone likeness now lay in shards on the floor. Arya gestured to the open space beyond. A pocket of survivors, dozens perhaps, clinging to each other in trembling shock. Samwell Tarly crouched near the back, tending to a leg wound on Gilly's thigh. Davos Seaworth leaned against a pillar, lips purpling from the cold, muttering prayers to any god that still had ears. Jon Snow, half slumped against the wall, stared at the cold earth as if seeking mercy in dust. His face was ash, his eyes vacant. Ghost lay at his feet, ribs heaving, one side streaked crimson. Sansa crossed to them and knelt, numb fingers brushing Jon's sleeve. He startled as though waking from a dream and seized her hand with desperate force, then loosened before she cried out. "There's little time," Arya whispered, voice ragged but steady. "We can't hold this place. They'll come. They always come." She knelt by Jon, trying to lift his chin. "You know the barrows to the south? Old tunnels beneath the ridge? Gendry says they might lead out beyond the lake. If we reach them by dawn, we may." Jon's laugh emerged broken, without mirth. "May what? Run? Every mile we march the dead will follow. They don't rest." He looked about at the faces turned toward him. "And the Night King rides Viserion now." There's nothing left in the skies to answer him. A hush fell. Even the children sensed the edge of despair, curling closer into their mother's arms. Sansa placed a palm over Jon's. "We survive," she said softly. "We hold each other, we move, we endure. Because that is what Starks do, even when the gods have forgotten our names." Footfalls echoed above. Heavy crashes, stone grinding. Dust rained from the ceiling. The crypts were no fortress. If the Walker Lord chose to crack them open, they would die as surely as the rest. Jon dragged himself up, swayed, and fixed his gaze upon the faces around him. "Gather only what you must. We move now," he commanded. Arya ducked into a side alcove and returned with 2 packs stuffed with furs and what little provisions remained. Gendry, face smeared black with ash, hoisted Bran onto a makeshift sled of doors bound in rope. The boy's pale eyes rolled back as though he conversed with ghosts older than the keep. Tyrion Lannister hobbled forward, favoring a battered knee. "I once promised myself I'd never crawl through another tunnel beneath a castle," he muttered. "Yet here we are, proving even dwarfs can lie to themselves." A rumble shook the stones. Frost flakes drifted from the groin vault above. Arya led the column through twisting passages, torches sputtering like dying hearts. They wound deeper, past crypts so ancient their inscriptions had flaked away. Firelight painted murals of the first men wielding swords of bronze, faces weathered by centuries. Somewhere behind them, steel clanged. A scream cut off in a moist gurgle. The dead had breached the lower stairs. Jon pressed Ghost onward behind the sled as the tunnel narrowed. The wolf whined with each step, but his snarls warned away unseen horrors. At last, a slab of stone blocked their passage. An old secret door Sansa remembered from tales of the Rat Cook. Davos and Gendry heaved together. It groaned, then shuddered aside, letting in a blast of night air so cold it burned the lungs. They emerged beneath a stand of hoarfrost pines on the southern ridge, where the shadows of Winterfell lay behind them like the outline of some slain beast pinned beneath the moon. But Winterfell had not yet finished dying. From within the walls, an azure halo billowed, like a second sunrise, frozen and malign. The Night King rose above the battlements astride the corpse-worm Viserion, shards of ice clinging to his crown of jagged horns. The dragon's maw opened, spewing a torrent of pale flame that washed across the keep, turning all to diamond dust. The survivors stood transfixed by dread and wonder. Sam whispered a prayer through chattering teeth. Viserion's roar shattered the sky, and the dead army beneath, legion upon legion, stirred in unison. They flowed out into the fields like a black tide crusted in white, countless and silent, brushing aside the broken barricades of wagons and trenches dug by the living. In the distance, the spears of the Unsullied, once a silver forest, lay scattered, each banner rigid, its fabric stiff with frost. There were no horns to sound retreat, only the sigh of a mortal winter resuming its slow dominion. Jon turned from the sight, face carved from granite. "South," he said. "Every step buys a breath." They trudged over crusted snow toward the tree line. Bran's sled left twin grooves behind them, an epitaph across the white. Above, the aurora flickered, a ghostly fire painting greens and purples upon the vault of heaven. The beauty mocked their misery. Every so often they looked back, and each time the shimmering host was closer, moving with impossible speed for bodies long dead. The wall had fallen, the north had fallen. The world now narrowed to a night road and a single hope. That someone, somewhere, still held fire enough to fight. It was before dawn when they reached the Barrowlands south of the lake, a place of hollow hills and standing stones half buried in drift. Wind roared across the frozen water, carrying scents of smoke and rot. Davos urged them toward a cleft between two tors crowned with cairns. A stone stair spiraled down beneath. They descended into clammy dark, torches sputtering against walls weeping with meltwater. The air smelled of iron and long-sealed secrets. Within the earth, the tunnels forked in a warren of catacombs, said to predate even Winterfell. Far above, the first light of morning broke. But shadows ruled here. They crept along canals of black stone, until they found a cavern wide enough to rest. Bran, rousing, whispered of shapes moving on distant winds, wings like thunder, though no one knew whether he spoke of memory, raven's sight, or dream. Gilly sang soft lullabies to her son, though her voice shook with exhaustion. Tyrion opened a wineskin taken from the crypts. Its bitter warmth passed from hand to trembling hand. A blood oath to the living. Jon could not rest. He paced the perimeter, sword drawn. When Arya joined him, they spoke in hushes. "We can't outrun them forever," Arya said. "If Cersei still sits the Iron Throne." "She won't open the gates for refugees. She'll think to hide behind the city walls." Jon's stare seemed fixed upon worlds she could not see. "If Cersei won't open them, we'll break them. She's fought the living. She's never fought this." "Then?" Sansa approached, overheard, and shook her head. Jaime believed the Golden Company would defend the capital. But mercenaries switch allegiance faster than ravens. "Our only hope is to reach Dragonstone, light the ancient forge there, make weapons of dragonglass again." Her voice faltered at the name of the fallen queen the forge once served. Jon's jaw tightened. "We'll need ships," he said. "Euron Greyjoy's fleet holds the bay." Tyrion limped near, overhearing. "Euron's fleet, that remains in King's Landing harbor, last we heard." He sighed. "If the dead reach the capital first, they'll add 50,000 new soldiers to their ranks by sunset." All of the wine in Dorne won't dull the taste of that irony. Jon faced them. "Then we don't let it happen. We cross the neck, warn every holdfast. We ride for White Harbor. If Davos can find a ship." Davos raised a brow. "My lord, I can sail a skiff through a wench's petticoat if need be. But we'll need a port not filled with corpses. Still, White Harbor's our best chance." Ghost padded forward, hackles lifting. A hush swept the cavern. From the tunnel behind came a chattering hiss, bones clacking like dry leaves. Jon signaled silence, extinguished his torch. In the black, they heard the cadence of claws scraping stone. Sam drew a breath too loud. Gilly stifled a frightened sob. Out of the dark emerged a single white, once a young stable hand, now a marionette of winter. It lurched, arms outstretched, one eye gouged. Before Arya could strike, Bran lifted a trembling hand. The white froze mid-step. Dada. For an instant, its limbs jittered as if yanked by unseen strings. Then slowly, it turned away, stumbling back through the passage, empty eyes unseeing. Bran slumped, eyes fluttering open. "They're not all one mind," he whispered. "The farther they march from their masters, the looser the leash. But soon, the Night King will sense us again." Sam's voice quavered. "How far to White Harbor?" 86 leagues, Davos answered. "Through country too cold for horses now. We'd need carts like coffins to haul the wounded." Jon knelt before Bran. "Can you guide us?" Bran nodded weakly. "I see paths of safety, but they close like doors behind us." He turned milky eyes upon Jon. "The Night King wants me still. I feel him seeking." A tremor ran through Jon. "Then he'll follow." He stood, sheathing his sword. "We leave at first light. The living in the south must know what is coming." The hours crawled. Each survivor wrestled ghosts of dread. In that hush, time had no measure. Only the drip of water marking heartbeats. When the first glow filtered through cracks in the ceiling, they rose. Outside, frost fog hugged the barrow fields. They kept to hollows between hills, marching double file, Bran's sled dragged by Gendry and Podrick Payne. Sansa whispered encouraging words to the few children. Tyrion muttered calculations of distance and pace, though the cold stole breath between each phrase. By midday they reached a ruined watchtower overlooking the King's Road. Smoke pillars dotted the white horizon, torched villages, signal fires, or worse. Southward, a dark ribbon unfurled upon the road. Refugees, hundreds, maybe thousands, trudging in silent columns. Rumor had outrun the dead. The living fled before the rumor. Jon took the lead down the slope. When the first fleeing northerners recognized a Stark among them, cries rose, hopeful at first, then hysterical. Questions cascaded. Is Winterfell fallen? Where is the Queen? Is the Night King slain? Jon answered with grim truth, and the crowd's anguish became a palpable force, an undertow threatening to drag them into chaos. Sansa stepped forward, voice clear over the gale, urging calm, promising sanctuary in the south. She lied with the grace of a ruler, forging hope where none yet existed, and the people listened, for they needed lies almost as much as bread. They joined the flow of refugees. Every hour more bodies merged into the procession. Farmers, escaped soldiers, free folk, and small folk alike. Wagons piled high with children creaked over rutted ice. Oxen bellowed as they died in harness from the cold. Yet the line advanced, an artery of stubborn life trying to outrun death's infection. Tyrion walked beside the Stark sisters. A strategist might see merit in this, he murmured. Bitter. The dead march fastest. They'll catch the head of the column first. If we remain near the rear. Sansa shook her head. Sacrifice the weak and call it strategy? No. We find a way to shield them, or we stand and die together. Tyrion offered a crooked smile. And people call me the idealist. He looked up into the glass-colored sky. Would that we still had dragons. The day waned. Campfires dotted the frozen plain where the road met a fork along the long lake. Jon convened with his captains, mostly men who wore no sigil but desperation. They lacked weapons forged of dragonglass. What steel they had would break upon the Night King's guard. Plans circled like vultures until Sam spoke. Old Town's citadel stored dragonglass blades centuries ago, in vaults beneath the high tower. The histories say as much. Many scoffed. The citadel lay nearly 400 leagues distant. But Jon's eyes lit with a spark of possibility. If even a fragment remains, Jon said, we could arm the south. Sam nodded fervently. Sansa objected. The citadel is far beyond the neck. We'll never reach it before the dead catch us. We must find stores nearer. Nemdamawal. Bran stirred. There is an island in the bight. Skagos. Obsidian still litters its shores. The Skagosi carve children's toys from it. I've seen it. A hush fell. No one doubted the boy's visions. We'd need boats, Davos reminded. Jon gazed east toward the hidden horizon. Then White Harbor matters more than ever. That night, clouds rolled over the moon, snuffing its pale lantern. In the dark, the dread grew. Some claimed they heard the creak of ice joints behind them. Others whispered of the dragon's wing beats echoing across the stars. Arya kept watch, her eyes reflecting the distant glimmer of campfires like twin shards of obsidian. When Jon relieved her near dawn, she handed him her water skin. Drink, she said. You're leading ghosts already. He sipped, then glanced at her. If I fall, you lead them. Arya's mouth twisted. If you fall, I'll burn the world before I let him have you. By the third day, frostbite gnawed at little toes. Horses collapsed. Children cried for milk. Yet the refugee tide reached a frozen river mouth west of Long Lake, a place locals called the Shivering Ford, where cattail reeds stood fearless against winter gales. The crossing slowed the column to a crawl. Jon deployed what fighters remained to guard the banks. From the north came a rumble. Drums of ice carried on wind. The Night King's host crested the snowy ridge, blackening it. Blades of ice glimmered like a field of stars. A scream rippled through the living, and terror broke the discipline of lines. Mothers clutched children, Old men fell in the press. Jon commanded, voice raw, but fear deafened. Arya slipped through chaos to the river's edge. She waded in, water up to her waist, guiding children to the opposite bank, one after another. Sansa organized wagons into barricades, turning fear into labor. Gendry hauled Bran's sled through mud and freezing current until his muscles tore and bled. Yet he did not stop. Tyrion stood atop a wagon, shouting directions, until an arrow of ice struck the wood near his foot, sending splinters into his cheek. Then, from the southern sky, came an answering roar. Deep, thunderous, alive. Drogon dot. The black dragon descended through ragged clouds, wings aflame with sunlight, his scales smoking where cold bit deep. Upon his neck clung Daenerys Targaryen, armor cracked, hair matted with ash. She had survived, though agony wrought lines upon her face. The living looked up, and hope surged like spring thaw. Drogon loosed a torrent of searing flame across the ridge, melting a swath through the walker ranks. Bodies exploded in showers of steam and shattering ice. The dead recoiled. Viserion appeared, blue jaws gaping, streaking toward his living brother. The two dragons collided in midair with a sound like worlds cracking. Scales and blood rained over the field. Drogon roared in fury and clamped upon Viserion's torn throat, but blue fire spurted, scorching his wing membrane. They spiraled earthward, grappling like titans. The ground quaked when they struck, rolling fools and brave alike into the river mud. From the gloom, the Night King emerged atop a dune of snow, his frost-crowned visage serene. With silent command he raised a gaunt hand. The dead surged, unstoppable waves crashing against the living's fragile barricade. Jon saw doom unfold, knew the line would break. Yet Daenerys rose from the broken ice where Drogon lay thrashing, and in her hand, she held the hilt of a sword, forged of no earthly steel. The rippling, molten red blade of dragonglass Jon once carried. She had found it in the shattered yard of Winterfell. Their eyes met across the chaos. Words unspoken passed between them. Regrets, oaths, love tainted by blood. Daenerys raised the blade high. Drogon reared, gathering his remaining strength. With a howl, she plunged the sword between the black scales of his shoulder. An old Valyrian ritual whispered in myths. Drogon's scream pierced bone and sky. Fire erupted from the wound, and it did not stop. His very heart ignited, the conflagration burning from within. A storm of flame blasted outward, a ring of dragonfire that rushed across the field, incinerating wights where they stood. The wall itself could not have held such heat. The Night King lifted his arms, conjuring shields of ice, but the blaze licked through them. His blue eyes narrowed for the first time. Confusion, then fear. Viserion shrieked as Drogon's essence ignited his frozen veins. A brother's pyre turned weapon. The undead dragon shattered midair, chunks of ice and bone scattering. Yet fire is fleeting in the heart of winter. The inferno subsided, leaving ash-laden snow swirling in swells of steam. Drogon collapsed, spent, his great head sinking. Daenerys knelt upon his scorched hide, face streaked black. Her breaths were shallow. The sword melted to slag in her grasp. She looked toward Jon across the smoking ruin, eyes fierce still, but life-draining. Jon tried to reach her, but white still pressed the ford. The Night King, burnt yet unbowed, marched forward, frost forming anew across cracked armor. With every step he drew upon the cold of the earth, the white steam reversing, freezing, reforming his legion. The burned whites rose again where they had fallen, skeletons coated in fresh crusts of ice. Jon realized the truth. Fire alone could not slay this darkness. The living could only run, carry embers southward, pray for strength. He roared for retreat, gathering survivors onto the far bank. Arya and Sansa hauled children while Davos directed carts. Whoever could hold a blade stayed behind to delay the dead another heartbeat. Daenerys stood unsteadily upon Drogon's carcass. She looked once more to Jon, silent question burning. He knew. She would not abandon her dying dragon. She would not abandon the North. And the North would not survive her sacrifice without meaning. Joan's throat closed, but he gave the only farewell she would accept. A silent nod, a commander's salute. She smiled. Small and tragic. Then turned to face the advancing ice. Jon forced himself across the ford. Through mud turned to slush by blood and flame. On the far bank, Sansa clasped his arm. "She can't hold them," she breathed. "She'll hold them long enough," Jon replied hollowly, though his heart bled with every word. Behind them, Daenerys raised her arms skyward. The wind gusted. Embers spiraled like fireflies above a grave. She spoke in Valyrian, words old as dragon song, and the carcass of her child shuddered. Flames rekindled along its spine, torching marrow, setting even the river alight where blood met current. A pyre of living flame erupted, a wall of incandescent wrath dividing earth and sky. The Night King halted, ice crown glowing orange. He lifted a hand and hurled his spear of frozen light. It pierced the blaze, but melted to water before it could reach flesh. Daenerys laughed, not a queen's laugh, but the laugh of a woman who had lost everything yet would deny her conqueror victory. The living fled southward under the shadow of that towering pyre. They did not look back again, not even Jon, lest their hearts shatter. Only Bran, dragged upon his sled, turned clouded eyes north, the glow painting his pallid skin in flickering hues of gold. Tears slipped soundlessly, waters of farewell for a dragon queen who forged hope from grief one last time. By dusk, smoke still smudged the horizon, but the Night King's host poured around it, inexorable. The column of refugees, stretched for miles, trudged on. At their head, Jon moved like an automaton, his mind divided between duty and memory of silver-gold hair lit by dying flame. Sansa held the banner of a direwolf hastily stitched from a child's blanket, a symbol that the North yet lived, though its hearth lay dark. Tyrion approached, speaking low. "When we reach White Harbor, you must send ravens to every corner of Westeros. Storm's End, Highgarden, even Sunspear. The living must stand as one." Jon nodded numbly. Tyrion continued, "And the Iron Throne? An empty chair means nothing," Jon said. "If we live, we'll choose our kings after." They marched. Night came swift and black, the stars veiled by frost haze. Somewhere behind, the army of the dead advanced, patient, tireless, unrelenting. And ahead, beyond leagues of frozen fields and desolate moor, King's Landing glittered like a jewel, unaware that the nighted storm of winter rode for its gilded walls. The long night was not over. It had only just begun. Okay. Night settled like thick velvet over the frost-wounded north, swallowing the last bars of dusk and sealing the world in a hush so complete that even the groan of the wind seemed wary of breaking it. Yet the column of survivors pushed onward, a wavering scar of torch points stitched across the barren plain. Bodies moved by habit, feet dragging, eyes hollow, minds numbed by images they could not unsee. And still each soul clung to the fading warmth of life with ferocity that astonished even its owners. When men and women staggered, others caught them beneath the arms. When a wagon axle cracked, strangers dropped to their knees in the rime to lash it fast with torn cloaks. When children whimpered, elders told stories about the nice warm inns of White Harbor, how the hearths there blazed bright enough to melt sorrow from a heart. No one believed the tales, yet the telling bought another mile. In the vanguard, Jon walked beside Ghost, one hand buried in the direwolf's fur, the other gripping Longclaw's ice-rimmed pommel. The temperature had sunk with the sun. Frost fringed his beard, tiny needles of pain prickling the cracked skin of his lips each time he breathed. He felt as though Winterfell's fall had hollowed him out, leaving a shell. But a shell could still move, and motion meant the difference between living and freezing upright, like one more roadside cairn. Behind him trudged a knotted cluster of the youngest, 11 children too small to keep pace with their families alone. Arya stayed with them, shifting constantly along the line, offering a canteen here, a short word there. She bore exhaustion like a second skin, but the set of her jaw dared anyone to name it weakness. Each torch she carried sputtered out before its time, yet she always seemed to draw another from thin air, passing the new flame down the ranks, so the little ones never quite lost the light. Sansa walked farther back, flanked by Davos and Tyrion. She had traded her fox fur mantle for a patched gray cloak, belonging to an old shepherd woman who shook too hard in the cold. The Stark banner she'd improvised now hung from the woman's shoulders, its threads stiffened by ice. Any pride Sansa might once have taken in carrying her house standard had given way to a new arithmetic. Warmth for the weak equaled one more heart beating come dawn. Beneath the ragged hood, her eyes roved ceaselessly over the refugees, counting, judging, recounting, as though sheer vigilance could keep death at bay. They marched until the sky bruised toward midnight, pausing only when the first scouts returned with word of a stone quarry sunk into a hillside half a league east. Walls intact, roof partially caved but offering shelter from the wind. Jon ordered the halt, though he suspected most would spend the night shivering rather than sleeping. Stillness invited memories, and memories invited despair, yet bodies required rest all the same. The quarry lay dark save for their torches. Swiftly Davos men fanned through the tiers, clearing frozen debris and lighting crude fire pits in the lee of shattered boulders. The quarry's gouged belly made a natural amphitheater. Flames licked up the sheer rock and reflected back, multiplying the light, convincing weary minds they had conjured a small summer. Ragged cheers rose as the crowd spilled inward. Carts formed a barricade across the mouth of the cut to discourage wandering dead. Archers took the high ground above. Arrows knocked more for comfort than true faith in pine shafts against whites. Jon stood at the lip and watched the last stragglers file below. Bran's sled descended on a jury-rigged pulley Tavish the blacksmith had whipped together in minutes. The boy's blank gaze never wavered from the northern dark. Jon wondered what visions crowded behind those dove-pale eyes now. Burning cities, perhaps? Or seas choked with ice? He wondered whether Bran still saw Daenerys pyre, whether he felt the moment her breath failed, whether he would caution Jon if Viserion shards stitched themselves back into a death dragon still more terrible. But Bran spoke not a word, and it seemed cruelty to ask. When at last the sentries reported all within, Jon descended. The miners had left a supply shed intact, its beams of seasoned oak sturdy despite warped doors. Jon claimed it for the wounded. Inside, lamplight drew ragged halos around faces gray with fatigue. Gilly, her thigh bandaged fresh but seeping. Podrick Payne, burns blistering his forearms from hauling Bran's sled through the dragonfire. Old Nan's great-grandson Rick, cheeks hollow from fever. A half-dozen others he barely knew. Sam kneeled by each in turn, pressing cautious fingers against pulses, murmuring instructions for poultices brewed from pine bark and snowmelt. The maesters would scoff, yet Sam's hands never once trembled. Jon crouched beside him when he finished. How many can march at dawn? Sam wiped sweat with an elbow. Podrick will march if he has to. The rest. He exhaled. Rick's lungs are filling. If we push him, he'll drown inside himself. The babe suckling at Gilly's breast has gone too cold. And Gilly 7 hells, Jon, her stitches are tearing. She needs a litter at least. Jon scrubbed his face, though grime only smeared deeper. A litter slows us. You know that. I also know if we leave them, they'll die slower. Sam's eyes were tired but hard. I can't tie splints around guilty conscience. Jon opened his mouth, found no answer, and closed it again. Ghost nudged his shoulder with a low whine. Sam caught the motion and softened. There's room in a stone hollow halfway up the wall. We'll build a sledge, lash it to Ghost, and the 2 donkeys still standing. They can carry Gilly and the babe and Rick. Podrick can walk beside. Davos thinks we'll hit gentler ground past the next ridge. We can make time then. Relief pricked Jones' chest, and a new guilt with it. Relief at one problem, solved by another man's prayer book ingenuity. He clasped Sam's forearm. Do it. And thank you. Sam nodded once and lumbered off, cloak flaring behind like a tattered wing. Jon watched him go, and tried to remember the last time he had spoken a simple kindness to anyone. Winterfell's fall blurred every hour since into one long gasp. But he rose, shuttered the door to keep the heat, and stepped back into knife-cold night. Down among the fire pits, Tyrion shared what remained of a Dornish red, perhaps the last bottle this far north, with Sansa, Davos, and the Ironborn scout Torwulf. Jon joined them uninvited. The wine tasted like smoke and cherries and regret. Tyrion swirled the liquid. "Reports from the rear," he said. "Two watchers swear they saw something lumbering along the horizon. Giants, perhaps, though in darkness every hill exaggerates itself. No pursuit tonight, but that could simply mean the Night King prefers to close distance in one great leap come morning." Torwulf spat into the fire where it hissed. "Dead don't need sleep. Probably march double pace while we're pissing ourselves over nightmares." Davos grimaced. "There's courage in pissing so long as you keep walking after. We'll do both." "Then?" Jon studied torch shadows flitting over faces younger than he felt. "We leave before dawn. White Harbor's 3 days at best. 5 if we're hauling wounded. The harbor's outer wall was stone thick as Hightower's heel when last I saw it. The Manderless may shut their gates if they doubt we'll stand the fight." Sansa tucked stray hair behind an ear, a strand bleached white by frost. "I knew Lord Wyman only briefly, but his son Wendell fought beside Robb. Wyman's younger heir." Sir Marlon is said to be of sterner stock than his father, hard bargaining, sharp tongue. If White Harbor stands, he will ask what we offer. And no. Jon let the unfinished sentence hang. They had little to offer beyond bodies to bury. Tyrion offered the bottle. Jon shook his head. Torwulf cracked knuckles scarred black by cold. "Word is, m'lord, a few Ironborn longships still ride at anchor off the harbor's lee side. Yara Greyjoy commands 'em. Lost contact after long winter's first blizzard, though. We raise their flags. Maybe we get deck room for a soul or two." Tyrion shrugged. "The Iron Fleet and the Crown. Uneasy bedfellows. Last I checked. But Yara's politics change with the tide. She may count a living crew more valuable than a dead queen's coin." "And see." Sansa's gaze lingered on Jon. "What of the Crown? We still ride beneath stark colors. Some in the South will see rebellion. The South will see survival," Jon answered. "If they're wise. If not, we'll educate them." Silence followed. Grim agreement. Then Arya's voice rose behind them. Speakers requested. She emerged from the dark, eyes reflecting the fire's orange rim. Torches doused on the north rim. "Our sentries want you." They followed her through narrow walkways between boulders. Beyond the barricade, the plateau sloped into a shallow basin. Up near its edge, 3 men knelt on the crusted snow, hands clasped behind heads. Each wore the gray-green cloaks of Northland poachers, arrow quivers slung empty at their backs. 2 sentries flanked them with drawn swords. One prisoner raised glassy eyes. "We bring tidings from last hearth," his words iced in the air. "And a warning." Jon crouched. Last hearth fell weeks ago. A twitch of grief seized the man's mouth. But pockets lived. That's how we lived. We followed the back trails south, hid by day, moved under night's wing. Today we crossed the track of your host. We seen fires. We hopped you'd feed us, but we also bring news. He glanced to his companions, swallowing. The dead are behind us less than a march. Thousands. And with them. Words failed him. Arya's voice knifed the pause. With them what? The man drew breath through chapped lips. A second Drake. Not the blue one. This one's pale. Paler than spit. Breathes a mist cold enough to crack stone. And it carries no rider so far as we've seen. Flies on its own hunger. Now. Jon's heart lurched. Another dragon died at Winterfell. Yet Viserion and Drogon were all that remained. Unless, Rhaegal between. Rhaegal had vanished days before the fall. Soaring south to scout supply lines. If the Night King had found him and turned him after Drogon's blaze died. The poacher shook his head. Can't say whose beast it were. But it flies low like a hawk, herding flocks of whites ahead. Spits its breath. Ice fog rolls. Live men freeze where they stand and the dead tidy up. cold knifed deeper than wind. Jon motioned the sentries to release them. "Food, fire, and cloaks," he told one guard. To the poachers he said, "Rest now. At dawn you march with us. You know the back trails, we'll need them." They nodded wordless gratitude, limbs shaking with more than chill. Jon watched them led away, his mind racing through possibilities as a raven tests thermals. A second undead dragon changed everything. Court politics, harbor walls, whatever hope Southron lords pinned upon stone ramparts. A single pass could turn boats to floating graveyards. They would need anti-dragon weapons, of the kind Qyburn once forged for Cersei. Scorpions of steel and core. They would need dragonglass-tipped bolts, wildfire if any remained outside King's Landing. He exhaled sharply, the vapor erupting like a soul escaping. First, they needed to reach White Harbor alive. At the watchman's post Tyrion stood, eyes hooded as though he already tracked odds on parchment. "A riderless dead dragon," he murmured. "Perhaps the night king tires of personal appearances. When generals have infinite troops, they delegate." Jon's shoulders rose and fell. "Makes him harder to kill. Also makes him predictable," Tyrion offered. "If he commits his heavy pieces north of the board while we sprint south, he risks overextension. The army of the dead is many things, but swift it is not, at least on foot. We might keep him guessing, force the host to split. When warboards stretch thin, lines break." Jon nodded absently. His eyes scanned the star-pebbled sky for any shadow of wings. Nothing. The thought of broken Rhaegal twisted his gut. He returned to the fires. His order roused camp hours before dawn. Torches extinguished, embers buried, bearings set southeast. The wounded slid onto Sam's newly built sledge, their faces sheet-pale under quilts. Snow had crusted overnight. Sled runners hissed on the hardpack, a blessing. Children rode atop wagons roofed with hide. At the rear, the poachers guided sled dogs tethered from abandoned farms. Half wild, but desperate for direction. As pale daylight smeared the horizon, the column wound through a stand of birch, white trunks crowding like silent sentinels. Frost crackled underfoot. Every twig snap rippled tension. Then the first blizzard of dawn rose. Less a storm than a breath of hoarfrost exhaled from somewhere behind. It carried thin, reedy moans. Perhaps wind through tree hollows. Perhaps the dead singing. No one spoke until they emerged on the far side, boots pressing the King's Road's familiar frozen mud. The road curved along a shallow valley. Mid-morning they stumbled upon the aftermath of a cavalry rout. Broken lances, gutted chargers, bodies stripped of gear by scavengers both living and dead. Sigils of House Umber, House Serwyn. Even the lion of Lannister-stained shields half buried in drift. Suggesting some pan-northern ad hoc defense collapsed here. Jon halted a quarter-mile short and sent parties through the wreckage for spare cloaks and salt-cured tack. While they worked, he walked among the fallen, lifting helm visors, memorizing faces. Each unknown soldier etched another debt he doubted he could pay. Among the corpses, Davos discovered a horse still breathing. Its flank bore frostburn where ice breath had seared hair to glass, but its eyes were clear. He led it to Jon. "Maester would trim the dead flesh," Davos said. "We've none such, but we could ride her gentle till she drops." Jon stroked the mare's neck. "I ride only when the slowest child can ride beside." Yet he accepted the reins. Some messages could not wait for the pace of a walking army. Tyrion approached, brow creased. "I fear we ride into another sort of ambush," he said quietly. "The South knows rumors yet lacks proof. A single raven seldom outruns dread. Some lordlings may try to bar passage, citing plague, invasion, prophecy, anything to protect their own. Then we show them," Jon said. "They can look into Bran's eyes and learn truth, or ask their gods for second opinions." He swung into the saddle, muscles protesting after days afoot. He sent 2 outriders ahead, Tormo the hunter and Arya. She insisted, knifing argument with a glance. No one doubted she could flicker through enemy lines unseen and slit throats before breath fogged. Jon tried once more to keep her in the main host. She answered by adjusting the strap of her wolf pelt and vaulting onto a pale gelding looted from the field. Debate ended. They set off at a brisk trot. Ghost loped alongside, breath puffing white. The army receded behind like a sound fading into memory. Soon the only noise was hooves muffled by snow. The King's Road dwindled into a series of villages, each more desolate than the last. At one hamlet they found every door barred, silent. At the next, houses stood open, deserted save for frost-mummified remains locked in tea-time tableau. An old man bent over a chessboard, hand poised to move a rook. A mother and two babes in a bed, blankets frozen in mid-crease as though seized by invisible hands. Ghosts scented the air but found no wights. Perhaps the Night King's vanguard considered this carrion stripped enough. Near midday they approached the ruins of Torrens Square. The curtain wall lay breached. Men of the Dreadfort once poured fire down these battlements in Rob's day. But now only icicles dripped from arrow slits. Smoke fluttered from chimneys within. Arya slowed, weighing risk. Jon signaled caution and approached under flag of truce, a strip of white shirt tied to a spear. A crossbow bolt thumped into the earth, 10 feet shy. A voice called, "State your allegiance or soil yourself where you stand." Jon removed his helm. "I am Jon Snow of House Stark. My companions and I seek parley." Murmurs drifted from the wall-top. Another figure leaned out, a young woman with tracks of soot on her cheeks, wearing a patched surcoat sewn with a red fox rampant. "Jon Snow's dead," she shouted. "Killed at Castle Black." "That rumor is greatly outdated," Tyrion muttered. Jon guided the mare forward another pace. "Come down and see the truth of it." After tense minutes, the drawgate cranked open a sliver. 3 spearmen stepped out, followed by the woman and an elderly knight who leaned on a cane carved in wolfwood. His surcoat bore House Tallheart's gray watchtower. He peered at Jon with cataract-filmed eyes, disbelief lining a face chiseled by age. "Jon Snow," he breathed. "By the mother," the boys groaned. Jon dismounted, bowed slightly. "Sir Helvar Tallheart, I thought you lost at the Red Wedding." "Only my taste for southern feasts," Helvar rasped. He regarded Tyrion. "But a Lannister strolls under Stark colors. There's a sight." Tyrion bowed with ironic flourish. "I've taken a field commission as court fool to Lord Snow. The pay's dreadful, but the company improves daily." The woman bristled. "Enough jests. Proof." Arya stepped forward, tugged down her scarf. Recognition sparked. The fox surcoat woman inhaled sharply. "Lady Arya. I saw you ride with my cousin Haley's years ago when we still chased crows with slings." Arya's eyes softened. "Lysa Tallheart. You were 8, I was 9. You dared me to steal a sweet roll. I recall you succeeded." Lysa lowered her spear. "Gods forgive me. Enter." They passed under the gate. Inside the small folk crowded Bailey edges, gaunt but fierce. 30 men-at-arms stood ready, though armor hung loose on bodies wasted by siege from cold. A handful of women moved among them with kettles of thin stew. Helvar led them to the great hall. Fires blazed in braziers, but the air smelled of damp dog and boiled cabbage. He poured ale from a keg that sloshed near empty. "We hold Torrens Square in Lord Marlon's name," he said, settling onto a bench. A fortnight past he ordered every stronghold between here and White Harbor to gather refugees, hold 2 days, then march south in staggered intervals. We were to be day 3. Day 1 never arrived. Day 2 brought only crows. So we wait, in case survivors follow. Stores shrink by the hour. Jon's hope sparked. Lord Marlon lives, and White Harbor stands. Ace of Last Raven, 8 days ago, Helvar answered. They've barred the gates, built fire trenches along the outer ward, posted watchers above the lighthouse. Sailors warn of white ships adrift on the shivering sea, but the harbor's boom holds. He sipped ale. Lord Marlon begs for every sword and spear still beating. He plans an evacuation by water. 5 house levies, 2 companies of sail sails, and 4 iron-borne longships anchor in the roadstead. Tyrion's brows arched. A sail sail fights for coin. What purse pays when gold loses meaning? Helvar coughed a laugh. Promise of passage. When the dead tear through these lands, those on a hull may yet outrun them. Jon leaned forward. Then Torrhen's Square must move. I'll send riders to escort your folk. We merge columns and reach White Harbor together. Stronger. Damned. Helvar's nod was immediate. Given leave, we march at dawn. Many fear the roads, but fewer fear them with a Stark point. Arrangements spun hours like cartwheels. Arya drilled Torrhen's bowmen in double-rank firing. Davos parceled barley and oats into equal sacks. Tyrion sketched marching orders on scrap parchment. Jon stood atop the wall, come twilight, watching snow fall in lazy spirals, thoughts drifting to Daenerys. Each flake flickered through the torchlight like embers snuffed too soon. He still felt the concussion of Drogon's death fire in his ribs, heard her distant laugh that was half sob, half song. The ache of leaving her burned hotter than any ice dragon's breath. By full dark, the camp around Torrhen's Square swelled. Jon's original column arrived, merging lines with tall heart retainers. Fires dotted the valley in a constellation whose fragile glow hummed against impending night. The wounded sledge reached the gates. Sam guided it gently while Ghost patted sentinel. Jon met them in the outer court. Sam's smile was wan. They held up well. Gilly managed a wave. Rick coughed, but sat upright. Podrick grinned and flexed bandaged arms as if to prove nothing ailed him. Hope kindled in Jon. He clasped Sam's shoulder before moving on. Deep in the keep's crypts, Bran waited, propped on a makeshift chair of alderwood. Candles orbited him like small planets. His face was a mask of calm. So profound, it unsettled even Jon. I dreamed of a river running backward, Bran said as Jon approached, voice echoing in the vault. It carried ships full of bones up onto land. The bones climbed out and walked. At their head marched a queen carved of white salt. Nay. Jon absorbed the image. A vision of White Harbor. A warning, Bran answered. The sea cannot protect us forever. Water freezes, ships splinter. Ice makes bridges where none existed. The dead do not fear depths. Jon knelt to meet Bran's eyes. You saw how to stop them. Bran's pupils dilated, swallowing torchlight. I see many ends. In one, you face the Night King at a lighthouse. Storm above. Sea below. In another, Arya's blade slips between ribs that glow like moonstone. In another, all is silence, and I am a tree again. He blinked slowly. Choose paths of living fire. Avoid those of still water. That is all I can say now. Jon exhaled, brushed a hand through Bran's hair. Rest. He turned to go. Jon. Bran's voice was small. Jon paused. Tell her I heard her song on the wind. It took Jon a heartbeat to realize he meant Daenerys. If she can hear me, I will. Outside, snow thickened, swirling eddies rising around lamplight like ghosts. Jon considered how often the living invoked ghosts now to fill the absences left by dead friends. The weight of those absences pressed hard as armor. He tamped it down. Tomorrow they marched. Dawn colored the clouds violet. The combined host snaked from Torrhen's Square, 2,000 souls moving as one sinew. Scouts rode ahead. Ravens took wing bearing word to White Harbor that Stark refugees came with Tallheart arms. Jon rode near the front, Arya beside him now. Tyrion in a pony-drawn cart, refusing to ride horses he could not see over. Sansa rode too, though the bite of cold turned her cheeks raw. She insisted, citing the need to be visible. The first day passed unmolested. They crossed the last river on a bridge of white oak beams hammered by frost but sound. On the second day they spotted smoke trailing from a manor near Harl's Brook. Unsullied spearmen held the yard. Banners of the silver three-headed dragon still crisp above the gate. The commander, Grey Worm, limped forward when Jon's outriders approached. His leg bore a ragged gash, but his grip on spear remained iron. Grey Worm's eyes held storms. Many of my brothers fell at Winterfell, he said in the cadence of Astapor's barracks. Some followed my queen into the night. I swore to protect her always. Now I guard what people remain until I learn she is. He hesitated. Jon dismounted. She held the ford at Long Lake. Her flame bought us time. I was there. Grey Worm's jaw set. Then I still serve her command, protect the weak. We march with you. Words spread through ranks like a fresh wind, unsullied on the line. Fear eased. Grey Worm integrated his 3 remaining cohorts with Tauren's spears, lacing discipline into raw levies. Night brought no attack. On the third dawn, white gulls circled overhead, sign of proximity to the sea. The horizon brightened not with sun but with walloping flashes, green and blue flickers dancing behind low cloud. Jon felt the hair lift on his arms. Wildfire? Or another dragon? He pressed the column into urgent pace. They crested Piper's Hill at midday. Beyond lay the wide estuary of the White Knife River, its mouth choked with ice flows. Across the water rose White Harbor, walls of granite streaked with salt, towers crowned in crenels, and the great Merman's beacon whose crimson flame guided ships to berth. Now the beacon glowed green, sputtering high arcs that burst overhead. Wildfire shells lobbed from siege scorpions, rigged to fling jars into the waiting sea. Each explosion vaporized ice, buying the harbor's boom a reprieve against the forming bridge Bran foretold. Refugee camps sprawled outside the landward gate, thousands thronging for entry. Smoke from cook fires painted the air a dusky haze. Above the gatehouse, banners of House Manderly snapped. Alongside orange pennants of House Stark, newly fashioned from sailcloth. The sight stung Jon. Hosts of banners that had flown from Winterfell's ramparts only days past. The host descended toward the camps. Trumpets on the wall blared a welcome. Figures waved from parapets. Jon's pulse quickened. Success for a moment. Yet, as they drew nearer, the sweet odor of rot mingled with brine. Piles of kindling ringed the camps. Atop lay corpses, dusted in lime chalk, awaiting immolation. Sickness had found the refugees first. At the outermost checkpoint, a Manderly captain halted Jon, demanding to know command ranks, head counts, wounded tallies. Tyrion produced scrolls. Sansa answered logistics. Arya glowered at red tape. Grey Worm redirected Unsullied to perimeters, reinforcing guard lines. Hours bled while scribes cross-checked entries. All the while the distant boom of wildfire echoed off water. A reminder that delay was luxury. Near sunset a horn sounded thrice. Gates opening. The combined host filtered through. Inside the city, cobbles clacked under boots. Seawind knifed between whitewashed houses. Merchants hawked bowls of fish stew, bartered for scrap iron, hairpins, anything. A tired jubilation coursed the streets, the relief of walls, offset by fear they'd soon prove tombs. Jon's party was ushered to the new castle, seat of House Manderly. The hall there smelled of smoke and tallow candles. Lord Marlon Manderly, broad of belly though hunger had paired him, rose from a map table. Beside him stood Yara Greyjoy, lean, scars bright across shaved temple. At her back loomed 4 captains in tattered krakens. Lord Marlon boomed. "You bring half the north to my doorstep, Snow, and expect supper for all." Jon inclined his head. "Sheltered Ain." "Then ships. We take as many as sail south tonight." "Them?" Yara snorted. "Tonight seas churn like a leviathan's pisspot. My longships can ride it, but your small folk will spew their souls before we pass the bar. Besides, half my deckhands lie gutsick in the infirmary, thanks to your undead ice storms." Tyrion stepped forward. "They can learn to row in 2 minutes if the alternative is waiting here for death." Marlon thumped the table. "No ship leaves until we load the dragonglass." He pointed to crates stacked along the wall, obsidian shards from Skagos, just as Bran envisioned, ferried by daring smugglers. "We've smiths forging arrowheads day and night, bolts for the ballistae. Sails form tomorrow for Driftmark, Casterly Rock, even Old Town. The South must arm." Jon's heartbeat quickened. How long until those shipments depart? 3 days for the first run. Tide and moon's favor, if the storm relents, Marlon answered. "Meanwhile, we hunker behind walls, 15 feet thick." A distant thunderclap rattled window panes. Not storm, but something heavier. Silence gripped the hall. Yara strode to a balcony, flung doors wide. Night air roared in, reeking of salt and soot. Far across the harbor, a pillar of white rose behind the lighthouse, mist, swirling, unnatural. Within the plume glimmered a serpentine shape, wings vast as cathedral vaults, scales pearlescent beneath moonlight. The riderless ice dragon. Its breath blasted stone. Outer warehouses along the quay cracked like eggs, their rooftops collapsing under sudden freeze. Harbor water steamed as it turned to rime, then to rising plates forming a jagged causeway inching toward the boom. Men on the walls loosed ballista bolts. Some struck home, shattering against crystal and hide. Others fell short, clattering into ice. John's stomach twisted. 3 days is a dream we no longer own. He turned, voice ringing. Prepare the city for assault now. All refugees inside walls. Gates sealed. Ballista crews to every tower. Unsullied to the sea gate. Wow. Yara's laugh was fierce. And my long ships? Load dragonglass into their cargo, John said. And their weapon racks. Then deploy in crescent defense outside the boom. If the dragon breaks through, you flank it. Aim for wing joints. Marlin blanched. A flank of wood on ice and death? We hold until dawn, John ordered. Wildfire buys hours. Dawn buys. He faltered, thinking of Daenerys. A fire blooming against black sky. Buys light to see our enemies' hands. Tyrion met his gaze, somber. A good speech. Let us pray we live to critique it. Bow. Indim Shator. They parted to their tasks. Sansa walked with Jon to the stair. If dawn fails us, then we make new dawn, he said, not quite believing. But her fingers squeezed his arm, steadying. Across the city bells tolled, a brazen cacophony summoning every soul to defense. Refugees poured toward inner gates. On tower roofs, scorpion arms ratcheted back, strings groaning. Wildfire whistled overhead, green-tinged comets that splashed steaming radiance on the ice dragon's path. Some detonated early, forming curtains of emerald fire that sizzled across flows. Others struck scales, searing fissures that hissed shut an instant later under cold vapor. Ghost bounded along battlements, snarling at the drake's roar. Grey worm massed unsullied ranks along the seawall, shields overlapping, spears tipped with freshly lathed obsidian, unrivaled in sheen. Davos oversaw placement of lanterns filled with lamp oil. When lit, they would hurl by trebuchet into ranks of whites once the dragon's vanguard appeared. Bran waited at the beacon's base, eyes rolled white, as he whispered to ravens swirling above, weaving flocks into intelligence nets. The night battle began like an opera. First the timpani of distant ice cracking, then horns, trumpets, the whine of wind through arrow fletchings, the shriek of children ushered underground. Jon stood atop the lighthouse stair, long claw drawn, Tyrion at his side bearing a torch. The dragon swooped low over the boom. Its breath issued in a spray of diamond dust. Chains of the harbor bar snapped under instant frost, links exploding like crystal. Yara's flagship Kraken's Kiss surged forward, banks of oars churning. She barked ironborn curses, scorpions on deck, launching bolts tipped with dragonglass and steel. One bolt sliced through membrane. Shards of scale fell. The dragon veered, screeching. Its tail smashed the Kiss's mast. Rigging snapped, sails splintered. Sailors pitched into water that froze around limbs. Unsullied atop the seawall unleashed a volley of flaming arrows, each trailing pitch-soaked cloth. Many missed and snuffed in water. Some found mark, lodging between plates. A glow spread along cracks. Warmth-seeking blood no longer hot. Yet the beast drove on. It crashed onto the outer quay, claws grinding stone to powder, wings folding close. Behind it, rolling up the frozen causeway, came the dead, whites in broken mail, naked whites of small folk drowned at the ford, white horses dragging sleds of more dead. They advanced wordless, blue eyes, multitudinous. Snow hid their feet. They seemed to glide. Jon raised Longclaw. A horn on the wall answered, deep and ragged. Arrows loosed in sheets, obsidian shards sighing through air. punching skulls, dropping bodies that twitched, then stilled. Yet for each that fell, two more climbed over. The first wave struck the base of the wall. Ladders of ice slammed against granite. White scrambled upward. Grey Worm roared in order. Lances thrust downward, shearing rungs, pitching corpses into water. Hot oil cascaded. Up on the lighthouse gallery, Tyrion seized a lever. Wildfire jars catapulted, blossoming into emerald suns along the causeway, incinerating 100 at once. Their bones charred black, yet rolled onward beneath others' feet. Jon watched the dragon. It gathered breath again, throat glowing white-blue. He shouted for scorpion crews. 3 bolts streaked. One skewered its cheek, punching through. Pale ichor spurted. Its breath faltered, venting sideways, flash freezing 2 whites and a section of wall in an instant. Ghost dashed back as the stone groaned. Sansa, sheltered behind braced shields with Bran and Sam, saw fissures chasing across the freeze-burnt tower base. She seized Bran's sled and pulled him farther in. Sam lent muscle despite panting lungs. The fissure spidered wider, a hiss like grinding teeth. Stone exploded outward. Rubble plummeted into the harbor, leaving a jagged gap the width of a barn door. Through that gap surged dead waterlogged sailors, flesh sloughing like kelp. Unsullied pivoted, shields bracing. In the clash, Jon glimpsed Grey Worm's spear dance, a blur of fatal geometry. Obsidian slivers whirled, severing knee tendons, necks, jaws. But numbers pressed. Shields buckled. Jon raced down the stair, 2 steps at once. He reached the breach as Grey Worm staggered. Spear haft snapped. Long claw swung, its dragonglass inlaid edge cleaving a white in half. He caught Grey Worm by the arm, pulled him back beneath still-standing arch. They fought shoulder to shoulder, blades flashing obsidian sparks. Overhead, the dragon clambered onto the breached wall top, opening jaws once more. Jon marshaled air to shout. Too late. Fog vomited, blanketing courtyard. Stone screamed. Iron screamed. Men's screams froze in throats. Where frost touched, armor shattered, limbs turned to brittle glass. Ghost yelped as paw caught rim. Jon's heart seized, but the direwolf leapt aside just beyond the arc. A sudden roar thundered from the beacon. Wildfire stores ignited by flying ember. The lighthouse spire erupted skyward. A pillar of green flame and shattered brick. Bran's sled lay perilous feet from the blast. Sam flung himself atop the boy as debris rained. Plumes of emerald fire fanned, bathing the dragon's flank. Scales crystallized. Split. Shed. The beast turned to flee, wings half torn, but fire licked internal fractures. Cracks glowed green. Light leaked from joints like lantern slits. Jon sights chance. Archers. Joints. Obsidian shafts sailed. One lodged beneath a wing hinge already weakened. Another found the creature's eye socket, vanishing to the fletch. The dragon lurched, wings snapping outward in reflex. Too late. Its own weight toppled it into the harbor, smashing quayside and sending sheets of brackish slush tidal waving into streets. Water surged through the breach, sweeping whites off their feet. Flames hissed. Wildfire meeting water born of salt naturally refused to extinguish, instead rolling in slick waves that clung to corpses. The harbor became an inferno of green and white. For the first time since Winterfell fell, Jon sensed momentum reverse. He pressed attack, rallying unsullied. Tallheart, stark levies. They drove whites back through rubble, arrows harping overhead. Ghost bounded among enemy lines, jaws ripping. Minutes, or hours. Later silence settled like ash. Where the dragon had fallen, only jagged icebergs remained. The body sunk, still glowing with internal emerald pulses as it froze from without. Whites floated, trapped in ice or consumed by flame. The causeway shattered. Tide washed charred bodies out to sea. Above, the night sky cleared and stars blazed hard diamond. Exhausted cheers rose across the walls, wavering at first, then swelling into roar. Jon allowed himself one breath of relief. Then he pivoted to Tyrion, who staggered from smoke-clouded stare, coughing. "Status?" Jon asked. "Lighthouse gone," Tyrion croaked. "But the city stands. Casualties heavy along the seawall. We've no tally yet." He wiped soot. "I'll fetch quills." Grey Worm leaned on spear stump, face streaked with ash and bloody froth, where cold air scalded lungs. He met Jon's gaze. "The Queen's flame lives in you," he rasped. "I follow." Jon clasped his forearm. "Tomorrow, we begin evacuation." "Tonight," Grey Worm corrected grimly. "More will come." Jon nodded. Dawn's crimson brushed the horizon, dawn bought with lives. He climbed ruins to the vantage where Bran and Sam sheltered. Bran's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow, yet his lips curved faintly. Sam exhaled shaky. He said the tide of bones ebbs for one day. Sam met Jon's eyes. After that, he didn't see. "One day," Jon murmured. He looked upon White Harbor, walls cracked but unbroken, streets steaming, ships listing yet afloat, humans alive and gasping. One day to load dragonglass, one day to choose which refugees to board first, one day to weigh who stays. One day to send ravens screaming south with stories of ice dragons slain and dead tides broken, to warn that the greater storm yet gathered. He gripped the parapet, letting dawn's chill bite deep. Branding memory. A promise forged in blood and wildfire. One day would be enough, because it must be. Somewhere beyond the horizon, King's Landing still rang its bells, blind to the frost creeping inexorable down the continent's spine. He would give them this day, and the next, until the living either prevailed, or left behind only their own silent, blue-eyed stories. And far out on the mirror of the sea, where ice still hissed beneath sunrise, the charred husk of an undead dragon slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to sink. A gull wheeled through the ragged dawn, its cry raw against the hush that settled over White Harbor. In the wake of the night's inferno, green smoke still drifted from the sundered lighthouse, curls of wildfire vapor, twisting upward, like desperate prayers. The great mermaid carved into the outer gate had lost her left arm to falling debris. Her mouth gaped at the icy wreckage strewn across the harbor. Charred spars, half-sunken hulks, islands of frozen corpses glittering in morning light. But the city still breathed. That fragile fact spread through streets and alleyways as surely as the first warmth creeping over the eastern horizon. Jon stood amid the broken crenellations of the seawall, shoulders cloaked in a film of rime that melted to droplets against the heat of his skin. Behind him, the Unsullied picked through drifts of shattered ice, spearing any twitching body that crackled back to motion. Ahead, beyond the mouth of the harbor where the boom had once chained the tides, the sea lay deceptively calm. Only the distant groan of the undead dragon's sinking carcass disturbed the hush. An intermittent, cavernous thunder, as if the deep swallowed something too vast to digest gracefully. He turned at the crunch of boots. Sansa approached, cheeks pale beneath a mask of soot, auburn hair matted beneath a fur-lined hood that had absorbed more ash than snow. She carried Bran's drag sled by its rope, Sam pacing beside to steady the runners over the rubble. Bran sat propped by cushions, eyes closed, lips moving in silent conversation with ravens invisible to anyone else. "No fresh breaches on the landward walls," Sansa reported without preamble. "Lord Marlon has posted twice the sentries. The small folk are sheltered in the granaries. Those roofs held. We lost 300 in the courtyard when the dragon's second breath froze the paving stones." She hesitated. "And ravens have gone out, but no answer yet." Jon nodded, absorbing the numbers as one might absorb lashes. Sharp, inevitable, adding to a tally of scars. "Any word of Arya?" "Her scouts rode at first light," Sam said. "She intends to find the Night King's main host, measure distance and strength." "She'll measure the wind in his lungs if she gets the chance," Sansa muttered, pride and fear braided tight in her voice. Jon's gaze drifted to the skyline where the girl had vanished less than an hour earlier. Just a smudge of horse mane and wolf pelt, flickering among frost-whitened rooftops, then gone beyond the Southron gate. "She has a way of returning," he said, half to himself. "We must be ready by then." Ready meant lifting the city whole and setting it on ships not yet seaworthy. It meant holding a crumbling harbor against an enemy that did not rest and had already sprouted a new head where one had been smashed. Ready meant squeezing time itself, wringing out every drop of daylight Bran had promised. One day, and forcing it to drown 10,000 clinging souls. He signaled to Grey Worm, who waited nearby, arm bound in linen stiff with dried blood. "Begin loading the dragonglass. Every longship carries half her weight in black stone, or not an ounce of food." Grey Worm bowed once, pain twisted the gesture, and stalked off barking Astapori commands that cracked like whips in the chill air. Jon turned to Sam. "Inventory the wounded. Anyone able to board without stretcher. Move them first. We'll need space below decks for those who can't stand. Then?" Sam tugged his gloves tighter. "I thought the first run was for the children." "It is. But the Taroshi Karak sit deeper in the water. Their holds are stone coffers. We ballast them with dragonglass, fasten hammocks for the worst injuries atop the crates. Balance saves both." He caught Sam's anxious frown and softened his tone. "The little ones go too, Sam. We won't leave them." Sansa's breath plumed white. "And who commands the fleet once it sails?" "I do," Jon answered too quickly. Then, slower. "At least as far as Dragonstone. From there the ships scatter. Old Town, Driftmark, Duskendale, Storm's End. Wherever there are forges and fighters left. Dragonglass without blades is gravel." "Denda." Sansa's mouth pressed thin. "You mean to leave the land route unguarded?" He looked past her to the inner streets, where columns of refugees shuffled toward the wharves beneath banners of hastily inked tridents and direwolves. "The land road is gone, Sansa. The neck floods behind us, rivers freeze to bridges. If men walk, they walk into death. We sail, or we drown here." Sam lifted Bran's sled onto the planking of a toppled ballista. "Dang no me, dod no way, door seems siwa." "Then we had better teach farmers to reef canvas by sunset." The docks swarmed like an upturned anthill. Manderley stewards shouted manifests while ironborn deckhands hefted barrels down gangplanks, curses flying thicker than gulls. Smoke from smithy forges coiled through the air. Within minutes of dawn, the city's armorers had lit every hearth, melting salvage iron to shoe the stone-tipped bolts Tyrion insisted on forging. Sparks leapt over lines of children clutching clay pots of pitch waiting to be passed hand to hand toward trebuchets. Between warehouses, priests prowled. Red robes of Aurelor mingling with gray of the Seven and ragged cloaks of the old gods, each offering blessings that looked suspiciously like conscription into bucket brigades. Tyrion himself limped along the quay, ink-black lists fluttering from underarm, stopping every few steps to mark another revision. Two ironborn arguing over ballast nearly knocked him into the harbor. He jabbed one in the thigh with a quill, then muttered an apology and hobbled on. A column of unsullied trotted past carrying sealed jars glowing faintly green. Remainder of the wildfire stock salvaged from the Beacon's magazine. They disappeared below decks of a Braavosi drama named Maiden of Many Tongues, whose captain claimed she could outrun any galley in Westeros. Tyrion hoped so. If the Dromon's fire guts ignited mid-channel, it would paint a pillar visible clear to Sunspear. He reached the foot of the new castle's quay, where Yara Greyjoy supervised rigging repairs on Kraken's Kiss. The longship listed to port, mast shorn, but ironborn carpenters had repurposed 2 sapling trunks into a crude lateen yard. Sailcloth patched with unsullied spear cloaks fluttered like mangled wings. Yara spat at a knot and jerked it tight. "Tell your scribes we sail by noon or not at all." She barked without glancing down. "Tide turns hard then. Catch it. We slip past the shoals. Miss it, we kiss rocks until dusk." Tyrion winced at the pun. "Lord Marlon promises a lull for loading," he said. "The king in the north promises his own body on your deck. Jon Snow promises, the sea disposes." Yara dropped to the plank beside him, wiping tar on breeches. "Has he considered you might better serve captaining?" A dwarf takes up less space than a king. I lack 2 necessary talents. 1 good hand for the tiller, and 1 bad temper for Ironborn. He smiled ruefully. Besides, I fill more space than you'd think. Yara's grin flashed. True. Pride has a turning radius wider than this harbor. She nodded toward a knoll of cargo. If we do reach Dragonstone, I'll expect half that obsidian as hazard pay. Obsidian grows common, Tyrion replied. Survivors, less so. We'll owe you coin instead, assuming coin outlives kingdoms. Coin always outlives kingdoms. She hoisted herself back up the side. That's why Kraken's hoard. Tyrion left her shouting orders. He disliked thinking beyond departure. Each logistic accomplished only revealed another snare. The city's grain stores could feed 10,000 for a month, but only if the granaries stood. The walls could withstand another siege, though not another dragon. The harbor's fleet could carry the people to safety, if storms and wights allowed. Every calculation ended the same. The margin, thinner than a drawn breath. He found Davos in a dry dock where carpenters had hauled a river barge onto greased rollers. Children perched like sparrows along its gunwales, passing rope coils in clumsy relay. Davos stood amid them, voice booming a litany of nautical terms as though teaching a chatty classroom. Haul away on the bitter end, that's it. Hands apart, keep the line flat. Pretend you're ringing a rabbit, not strangling a cat. He clapped 2 boys' shoulders, nodded when they straightened the twist. Seeing Tyrion, he waved. Lord Lannister, come, lend your noble pen to not work. I left my fingers at the quill, Tyrion answered. You've conscripted half the orphanage. Idle hands breed fear. Fear breeds mistakes. Davos gestured to the hull. We'll lash 2 more barges like her to serve as passenger rafts. Shallow draft can follow the fleet along coast and pick up swimmers should another worm dive us. Da. Tyrion raised brows. And should the worm breathe on them instead? They're kindling either way. Davos exhaled, gaze wandering to the open sea. But any soul we haul aboard buys 1 more arrow, 1 more swing. War's a ledger. Pay enough coppers and sometimes fate pauses to count. He rubbed his palms. Speaking of coppers, we scrounged chainmail from the city watch armory. Broken rings, cracked rivets, but enough to fashion hauberks for the Leekland levies. Muscle under iron lasts longer. Then the one. Tyrion tapped his parchment. I trust you to clothe them. His gaze lingered on the children tying lines with tongues stuck between teeth. Will they sail too? When their parents sail, Davos said quietly. Until then they build their own lifeboats. A cry lifted from the gate tower. 3 blasts from a bronze horn, stretching across the harbor like a blade upon glass. Every head snapped up. Davos seized his cloak, Tyrion his lists, and they hurried onto the quay where Jon already sprinted with Ghost, loping at heel. Riders thundered through the gate, Arya at point, throwing her mount sideways to a skidding halt that showered stone chips. Behind trailed a pair of horsemen garbed in cracked red lacquer armor. Dothraki blood riders once sworn to Daenerys, now caked with frost that dulled their bright bells to silence. Arya swung down, face a map of windwhip and dried blood. They're a day out, she said, breaths ragged. The Night King marches 20 leagues northeast with the rest of his army, tens of thousands. Giants in the van. At least 2 other white worms circling above. No wonder. A hush stilled the dockside bustle. Tyrion heard the wind rattle furled sails like drumskin. Do they follow the coast? Jon asked. Arya shook her head. They cut the inland road, straight for the Weeping Water Ford. If they cross by dusk they reach the city before dawn tomorrow. Bran's day closes fast. The blood rider nearest bowed stiffly in saddle. Khaleesi's dragon sleeps in ice, but we saw her sign. Steam fissures near the rear, as if something beneath breaks chains. His breath plumed white, eyes shining crazed hope. Fire may ride again. A crack in the corpse worm. Davos muttered. Perhaps wildfire reached the heart. Or perhaps something else stirs beneath the bay. Tyrion's mind raced. Water the dead cannot cross, but if the ice bridges... Enough. Jon cut in. He faced Grey Worm, who had arrived silent as a shadow. We sail on the turning tide. Noon becomes mid-morning. Every able body not boarding secures the walls, buys hours. His voice carried across the clamor. Manderley and Tallheart garrisons hold White Harbor. The fleet breaks south for Dragonstone and beyond. Any ship too slow to keep formation hugs shore. Davos barges shepherd stragglers. Unsullied form rearguard on the last vessels. And so, Grey Worm struck fist to chest. We will hold the quay until water rises. Jon turned to Sansa. Your place is on the first ship. The realm will need a stark voice wherever we land. She opened her mouth to protest. He forestalled her with a look softened by affection and iron. Someone has to tell the truth of Winterfell. And of Daenerys. Sansa's eyes glimmered. She bowed once, then strode off to muster the children. Arya righted her stirrup. I'm not sailing. Arya. I ride north again. Someone must slow them. A needle in the dark can bleed time. Jon saw in her face the same fire that had glinted in Daenerys' last smile. He clasped her forearm. Bleed only enough to live, then follow the fleet on whatever horse remains. She smirked. I'll borrow one from the dead. With a nudge she was gone, her mount already swallowing cobbles. By mid-morning the harbor churned with the feverish tempo of escape. Longships slid into gray chop. Shields lashed along rails, decks piled with crates of obsidian wrapped in straw. Warships of Braavos and Tyrosh cast off near simultaneously, sails catching the brisk offshore gust that heralded the turning tide. Kraken's kiss led the van, oars sinking as one. Behind, 2 Volantene cogs, their holds stuffed with Tallheart and Serwyn peasants, bobbed low. Tug rafts crewed by Davos child sailors clustered between the heavier hulls, tethered like ducklings. Jon trod the deck of Northern Star, a Manderley galliot repurposed from whale oil trade. Its twin masts creaked under patched canvas and blazoned hastily with direwolves. Bran lay secured near the stern. Sam crouched beside to whisper reassurance or prayers. Hard to tell the difference. Tyrion stood by the stern rail, quill tucked behind ear, scratching tallies of sails thinning on horizon. Grey Worm, armored now in half-frozen mail, manned the quay with a shield wall of 100 unsullied. They watched the fleet depart without a murmur, spears grounded, eyes fixed north where low hills shimmered in rising rime. The last of the outbound tide seized the ships, swinging bows seaward. Jon felt the deck tilt. Smelled brine sharpen in his nostrils. He lifted a spyglass. Far beyond breakwater, whitecaps glistened beneath a slab of sun. Closer, the ice-wrecked dragon lay half-submerged, flukes of frost blooming around it like malignant coral. Smoke still bled from ruptured seams in its hide. Occasionally a bulge of gas vented, and green flame spurted then died, quenched by encroaching sea. A funeral pyre that refused to finish burning. May it drag itself to the abyss and stay there, Tyrion muttered, appearing at his elbow. Or take the Night King with it, Jon said. He lowered glass toward landfall. Refugee fires dotted the outer rampart. Atop the highest tower, a crimson banner flew. Fireheart of the Red Priests, merged with a silver kraken embroidered at its center. Yaris' jesting salute to new alliances. He watched until the banner shrank to a pinprick in murk. The fleet rounded the headland. Sails billowed. Ropes hummed. Gulls shrieked overhead. For a breath time stretched, holding all fears at bay. Then a horn moaned from shoreline. Low, tremulous, echoing across water. Another answered, farther east. Then another beyond sight. A ripple along the coast. Dust clouds, tiny at first, growing, converging on the harbor. The Night King's host had arrived. Jon's pulse hammered behind ribs. He signaled to the helmsman. The galliot heeled southward, sails taut. One by one, ships ahead yawed, catching wind. Northeast. Smoke pillars rose where whites torched fishing villages, lighting their path with stolen flame. Distance buys nothing if the ice holds, Tyrion said, reading Jon's glance. We need open water wider than any frost can bridge in a night. We'll have it by dusk, Jon replied, though a worm of doubt gnawed. The biting bay widens leagues past Pebble Point. They'd need a fleet of their own. Tyrion's gaze flicked to the fractured dragon. In this war, our assumptions drown by the hour. Late afternoon, snow squalls swept across the fleet. Visibility narrowed to arrow's flight. Sails disappeared into white curtains. Davos tug rafts struggled, waves slapping boards. Jon paced from prow to stern, barking corrections to sailors raw as new-scythed hay. Crashes sounded as spars jerked. Ropes snapped. A child slipped across deck, but Sam caught her wrists. Bran's eyes flickered. Skyward, inward, no one knew. A thud jarred the hull. Jon peered over rail, an iceberg, newborn from the dragon's freeze, drifting faster than the current. The galliot clipped it, shaved a chunk the size of a cart. Other ships shouted warnings. The convoy altered course. More bergs loomed, scattered like teeth. Snow thickened, swirling around shapes that glimmered blue in deeper blue. Tyrion joined Jon. The sea churned slush faster than the wind. Something cools it beyond season. Jon's gut tightened. The dragon? Or the night king's breath across miles? Tyrion's mouth twisted. Ice storms stolen from sky, poured into ocean. Gods. He glanced up. We should shorten sail, wait for clearer water. Wait in these bergs box us, Jon countered. Press on, helmsman, so east another 2 points. Keep Krasny's Drummond windward. Northern Star lurched, slicing between ice floes. The convoy followed, serpentine, each ship sounding bells to mark position. Gulls vanished, replaced by ravens that circled overhead. Bran's perhaps, or the Night King's spies. Jon tried not to think which. Hours passed. Snow eased, leaving a pewter dusk. Ahead, cliffs emerged. Pebble Point, jagged slate jutting into spray. Waves smashed the rocks, flinging sheets of frozen brine. The fleet navigated wide berth. Beyond, the biting bay opened. Vast ice-flecked, but clear lanes glimmering. Relief rippled along gunwales. Then a shout from the crow's nest, shapes astern. Jon spun. Through dispersing squall, a dark stain stretched on the northern horizon. Ice floes concertinaed into a flat plain, creeping fast. Upon the plain marched specks, tiny at this distance, yet clearly bodies moving atop the ice. At their head, towering silhouettes. Giants. Above, 2 pale dragons flanked one another, wings pumping slow but inexorable. Their flight stirred gusts that rippled the newborn ice forward like a blanket unrolled across sea. Terror froze sailors at the rails. Jon's throat constricted. The ice road formed faster than any current could break. Night King bridging the bay to chase them. He barked orders. Signal Yara. Full sail so east. Bells clanged. Flags hoisted. Kraken's kiss answered with a flare-pot hurled skyward. Orange blossom in gloom. Then veered, oars thrashing. Yet the fleet could not outrun what the world itself congealed to carry. In minutes, the leading edge of the ice sheet hissed 10 ship lengths astern, creeping within arrow range. Whites along its front rank lugged scorpions of bone lashed with sinew, firing javelins carved from icy stalactites. One bolt smashed the rudder of Maiden of Many Tongues. The Drummond slewed, colliding with a Taroshi cog. Men tumbled into freezing surf, limbs locking near instantly. Jon's jaw clenched. Cut free the barges, he ordered Davos by shout across water. Their anchors may slow the ice. Davos waved acknowledgement. The tug rafts severed ropes, each tether weighted with cast iron pots of burning pitch. As the rafts drifted behind, archers ignited the pots. Massive plumes of flame blossomed, puddled on the growing ice, charring its surface black. The sheet slowed, cracks spidering around the blazing anchors. But nothing stopped entirely. On deck, Bran roused. His eyes glowed eerie milk. His voice, strangely deep, spoke above the howl of wind. There is a fault beneath us, he intoned. A vein of fire. Break the crust and the sea will burn again. Down. Sam's pupils flared. A volcanic vent. There are hot springs all along the broken arm. Jon zites the boy's shoulders. Where? Bran's hand lifted, pointing seaward off starboard bow. Northern Star shifted, presenting a broadside to the coordinate. Jon looked to Tyrion. Wildfire. Tyrion hesitated only a breath. We have 6 jars left in the hold. Bring 4, Jon said. Anchor them to a spare mast. We'll ram the ice, then ignite. Sailors paled, but orders moved. Gray barrels painted with demon sigils were hoisted, lashed together with chain to a beam shorn from the foredeck catapult. Davos boys clambered across rigging to set fuses of pitch-soaked hemp. Jon took the helm himself, aligning prow toward an ice tongue jutting from the sheet. Wind wailed through shrouds. Ghost braced beside Bran's sled, fur on end. Sam whispered prayers to the 7. The old gods. The Lord of Light. All hedged bets. Now, Jon shouted. Northern Star plunged ahead. The beam overhung prow, barrels bobbing. Timbers shrieked as hull met ice. Sheets of splintered rime vaulted aside. The barrel smashed atop, skidding across glassy surface. Sailors heaved lines. The beam detached, sliding. As it settled, Tyrion cut the fuse with a torch. Sparks raced along hemp toward barrels. Jon spun the helm hard a larboard. The galliot scraped free, drifting as water closed. The fuse hissed, sputtered, then plunged behind a fragment of ice and vanished. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the sea convulsed. Green hell bloomed underwater, releasing a gout of boiling water and steam that jetted skyward. The explosion ripped the fault open. Molten gases met brine, expanding into superheated foam that hurled chunks of ice 100 feet. A roar like a dragon's death cry shook masts. Northern Star bucked, decks awash with scalding spray. The ice sheet buckled. Great fissures raced across its breadth, snapping under the sudden swell of boiling current. Whites toppled into widening chasms. Giants crashed through ruptures, floundering. The sheet calved apart, chunks tilting then plunging as seawater surged. Cheers burst from ships as they steadied on rising tide. Flames of green writhed atop water where tar-lined barrels had breached and spilled. The wildfire mingled with natural gas from the vent, feeding a ring of pyre that licked the edges of broken ice. Hissing steam formed a shroud, obscuring the Night King's army, which skidded to a halt at safe distance. On Northern Star's deck, relief mingled with terror. Bran sagged unconscious. Sam knelt, checking pulse, nodding to Jon that the boy lived. Tyrion leaned over rail, hair singed, face lit by kaleidoscopic emerald glare. Fortune, he whispered, voice hoarse, still hates us less than them. Ice dragons circled above the steam cloud, hesitant to dive where updrafts threatened to sear wings. Their shrieks carried frustration. Jon gripped the helm. Make southeast, he called. Ride the warm water south until dark. If the wind holds, by dawn we reach Dragonstone's lee shore. Sails filled again, stained lurid green by reflected fire. The fleet crept past the burning ring. Behind, the Night King's army loomed motionless on fractured platforms. A tableau of winter denied its kill. Yet Jon knew it was only delay. Ice would mend. Giants would regroup. Dragons would find new fury. The bay's fire would subside, and the tide would turn once more. But the living had stolen another handful of hours. Night draped itself over the convoy like a black sail stitched with stars. Wind freshened, gentler, without snow. Hulls groaned as they cut warmer currents fed by the vent. Somewhere below, leviathans stirred, confused by fire that tasted of moonless sky. But none surfaced. Jon relinquished the helm to a manderly mate and paced decks, checking lines. Every face he passed, bearded fisherman, Taroshi Sellsword, shivering child, mirrored the same exhausted awe, a shared miracle none dared voice aloud. Near the stern, Gilly cradled her babe in crook of arm. Crooning low, Rick Talhart dozed beside, fever broken, breath steaming steady. Podrick leaned on railing, humming a tune half remembered from quieter times. Sam spoke softly with Tyrion about coastal currents, mapping likely landings. For one heartbeat, the ship felt like a hearth hall afloat, all adversities distant. Then Bran awoke. His eyes opened black as outer space. Pupils dilated beyond iris. He gasped, chest convulsing, a sound like wind ramming shut a door. Sam started. Jon knelt, touching the boy's brow. It burned with chill. A paradox. Bran's lips moved. Words emerged jagged, as if another voice puppeteered his tongue. "The king beneath the waters rises," he said. "Not of ice, of stone. Slumber ending. Fire's child and ice's mother meet upon a threaded shore. Blood of dragon, blood of deer, blood of kraken, blood of doom. Beware the song that sleeps in stone, lest it waken full." He shuddered. His eyes rolled white, then closed. Sam and Jon exchanged alarmed glances. "Prophecy," Sam murmured. "Or delirium?" "Both," Tyrion answered, arriving breathless. "In my experience, prophecy is delirium with better sponsorship." Jon brushed frost from Bran's hair. He spoke of fire's child and ice's mother. Cryptic nonsense, unless... "Dragonstone," Tyrion said slowly. "Island forged of black glass. Mothered by volcano. Fire's child indeed. And stone kings," Sam added, recalling lore. "The Valyrians carved giants into cliffs when they built the fortress. Legends say some statues guard hidden catacombs of sleeping drakes." "Then," Tyrion chuckled darkly, "if stone dragons crack open, we'll be spoiled for choice of enemies." Jon rose. "Whatever Bran saw, we learn more at Dragonstone. Until then, keep silent. We can't afford panic about stone-born monsters." Sam tucked blankets around Bran. Tyrion moved off, mind already drafting contingency scrolls. Jon ascended to forecastle, ghost shadowing. The wind shifted to southwest, salty and mild against his cheeks, promise of southern air. Far ahead, clouds flickered with distant lightning that traced peaks of storm around Cape Wrath. Somewhere beyond that curtain lay Dragonstone, with its jagged crown and halls of haunted history. Jon's memories of the island pricked. Nights planning war with Daenerys in the painted chamber. Flames dancing in her eyes. Mornings on the battlements watching waves crash, hearing stories of ancient dragons curled beneath its lava tunnels. He clutched the rail, swallowing grief like salt water. If ghosts lingered there, they would walk beside him when he set foot again. Hours crawled. Night deepened. Lookouts called sporadic contacts. Wind-shaped spindrift mistaken for wings. Floating logs guessed as white rafts. But no pursuit breached the fiery barrier behind. Perhaps the Night King gathered patience, conserving strength. More likely, he watched through some sorcerous lens, reading their heading, weaving counterplay measured in storms. Near midnight, the moon climbed, a pale coin glaring through rifts. Its sheen lit a solitary boat bobbing ahead. A skiff with single mast snapped, hull listing, oars adrift. Jon ordered approach. 2 sailors and Ghost accompanied him in a launch. As they neared, they saw shapes aboard. 3 corpses, eyes open, skin blackened by frost. Not whites, no blue glow. The boat bore painted stripes of House Florent, a crest seldom seen this far north. Jon grapple-hooked the rail, climbed. Salt eyes cracked under boots. One corpse clutched a leather satchel emblazoned with Arailur's fiery heart, twin to the banner flown over White Harbor. Jon pried stiff fingers open and removed the bag. Inside, a bundle of parchments, wax seals bearing various sigils. Baratheon stag, crowned reach rose, Martell sun spear. Dispatches? He rifled quickly. Each bore the same message in different hands, a refrain. The fire fades, the cold advances. Come to Dragonstone. Some dated weeks, some days. All addressed to a name scratched out, overwritten with, "The Lord of Light's Chosen." Jon stared at the crossed name. It had been Queen Daenerys Targaryen. Hope twisted like a knife. These letters had sailed toward a queen who would never read them. But the bigger question: who recalled them, and why? He pocketed the satchel, examined the bodies. 2 men, 1 woman, sunburst pins on cloaks, priests of R'hllor, their faces contorted in final terror, but no wounds visible. Frost only. They had fled south, homeward, and died on empty tide. Perhaps overtaken by cold rising behind, he muttered a prayer in northern Burr, then signaled his men. They ignited pitch, set the skiff aflame. Flames licked sky as they rowed back. On Northern Star, Tyrion listened to the account, thumb stroking beard. Dragonstone draws many prophecies, he mused. If priesthoods converge there seeking audience, we may inherit a firestorm of faiths. Let them, Jon said. We need zeal as much as steel. He handed the satchel. Decipher them if you can. By dawn's first blush, the convoy sighted Dragonstone. The island's basalt spires rose from sea mist like claws of a titan raking crimson sky. Gulls wheeled screaming in updrafts. Smoke curled from vents along Dragonmont slope. A gentle exhalation, proof the volcano still simmered. Against that backdrop, the fortress perched, ramparts carved into dragon wings, gargoyles glaring from buttresses. Fires flickered along parapets, and atop the sea dragon tower snapped banners unknown. A triple spiral of gold on black. Davos muttered curses at the sigil. Tyrion squinted. Spiral? House Valerian? No, their seahorse sports silver. He fetched glass. 3 spirals. Could be our lore sect iconography. Jon felt unease coil. Run out the colors, he ordered. Northern Star hoisted direwolf banner high. Other ships followed. Krakens, tridents, broken chains of the Unsullied. The fleet spread into formation. Beacons atop Dragonstone flared recognition. Torches waved. A horn echoed across water, deep and sonorous. Gates at the base of the causeway groaned open, revealing shore batteries. Scorpions trained outward, but not yet cocked. A lone skiff rowed out. A hooded figure in red stood in prow, cloak billowing. Jon recognized the posture before features. Melisandre, the Red Woman. The skiff drew alongside, sailors lowering rope ladder. She climbed, older, gaunter, eyes burning brighter for their hollowness. She bowed low before Jon. King in the north, she intoned, and bearer of the flame's last hope. The Lord of Light has awaited your return. Now, Jon's stare hardened. You serve many masters. Only one, she corrected softly. But even he serves the great pattern. Her gaze swept deck, pausing on Bran, whose eyelids fluttered. She inhaled sharply. The pattern coils tight. Tyrion cleared throat. Forgive rudeness, lady, but whose banners claim this fortress? Those who heard the call, Melisandre said. Priests from Volantis Mer, Lys Ashai. They gather for the birth in stone. Jon folded arms. Ein, Dites. The song Prince Rhaegar spoke of has reached final verse, she said. Ice and fire met at Winterfell, but the chord unresolved. Here, fire waits to be born into full harmony. Stone awakened to living flame. When the child rises, the darkness will meet its mirror. Tyrion sighed. Metaphor and riddles. Have any plain sailors in your flock? Melisandre's lips curved. Come ashore. Witness, then decide. Jon exchanged looks with Davos, who glowered. Years ago the Onion Knight would have gutted the Red Woman on sight, yet the world had spun axes since. Davos nodded grudgingly. Caution, not trust. Very well, Jon said. But first our wounded. Infirmaries stand prepared, Melisandre assured, gesturing to barges already launching from fortress slipways. Healers in red paddled toward ships, carrying stretchers and poultices. Jon beckoned to Sansa Dà. You oversee disembarkation. Make certain no northern child vanishes into prophecy without permission. She squeezed his hand. And you? I witness what burns beneath the mountain. Ghost growled low. Jon soothed him, then followed Melisandre onto the skiff, Sam and Tyrion accompanying. 2 Unsullied rowed with measured strokes, steering toward the basalt stairs that serpentined up to the fortress gate. Sea spray salted their faces. On landing, Melisandre led them through archways carved like dragon jaws, down torch-lit corridors warm with geothermal breath. The air smelled of sulfur and incense. Chants echoed. Low choral waves in Old Valyrian, They passed priests kneeling, foreheads smudged with ash. Some bore brands on palms shaped like spirals. At last they emerged into the ancient dragonglass forge, vast cavern beneath Dragonmon's flank. Molten rivers glowed in troughs, casting pulsing orange upon vaulted ceiling. Racks of unfinished blades lined walkways. Hammers rang while smiths labored day and night. Crates of obsidian from the fleet already stacked near smelters. Melisandre guided them further, across a rope bridge spanning a chasm of glowing magma. Heat blistered skin even at distance. On the far side, a dais of black stone rose, surrounded by concentric rings of runes etched in glowing red crystals. Atop the dais lay a massive egg, larger than any dragon egg Jon had seen in texts. Its shell mottled obsidian and veins of crimson. "Fire's child," he whispered. "The last dragon egg of old Valyria," Melisandre said. "Discovered beneath the dune's ash by an Ashai wanderer, brought east hidden generations. Prophecy required it hatch when ice strangled the world." She pointed toward Molten River. "Tonight, when the star falls, the egg shall bathe in the mother flame." Tyrion's cynicism faltered. "A star. Look to the sky at dusk," she said. "You will see the red comet's return, the sword of the morning sky. Its passing marks the hour." Sam swallowed. "Hatching a dragon. Can it be controlled?" "The last time." Melisandre's smile was bleak. "Control is illusion. The Lord of Light does not command flame. He is flame, yet flame seeks harmony with flesh bound to purpose." She turned to Jon. "Twice reborn, once by ice, once by fire. You are purpose." Jon felt weight compress his chest. "I am not Azor Ahai, no matter your translations. Azor Ahai is metaphor. You are the balance. The egg will choose its rider. The darkness has its king. Fire must have champion." She extended a hand. "Will you carry this burden?" Jon looked at Sam, who shifted uneasily, then at Tyrion's guarded gaze. He thought of Daenerys. Flame made flesh, and of Bran's warning. Fire's child and Ice's mother meet upon a threaded shore. This was that shore. But prophecy seldom told full cost. "I'll witness the ritual," he said finally. "If a dragon hatches, I'll do what needs doing to keep it from turning on the living." Melisandre inclined head. Then dusk approaches. Outside, ships unloaded under watchful towers. Wounded carried to infirmaries carved from old barracks. Children guided into halls, warmed by hot spring conduits. Sansa oversaw bedroll placement, ration distribution. Davos organized smiths to ship hundreds to craft arrowheads. Banik, Yara anchored Kraken's kiss beyond reach of scorpions, suspicious of priest banners. Afternoon, thick clouds gathered. Storm system trailing them south. Thunder grumbled like distant drums. Yet high above, through rents in cloud, a scarlet streak shimmered. First faint, then brightening as sun dipped. A comet returning from beyond horizon, painting sky with blood-red fire. Priests flooded parapets, chanting. Melisandre led Jon, Sam, Tyrion across the bridge once more. Heat intensified, radiating waves. The egg glowed faintly, veins pulsing to the cadence of approaching star. Torches extinguished themselves as though bowing to comet light. Silhouettes lined cavern periphery, R'hllor acolytes, unsullied guarding, stark bannermen uneasy with magic yet unwilling to leave king unguarded. Melisandre raised arms. Her voice spiraled through Valyrian phrases that tasted like flame. Priests echoed, beats combining. At crescendo, she thrust a rod of black glass into the magma river, and withdrew a bead of pure living fire at its tip. No bigger than a peach, yet swirling with colors unseen. She placed the bead against the egg. It sank into shell like sunset into sea. The egg throbbed. Cracks spidered across obsidian surface, lines glowing intense white. A rumble shook cavern. Ash sifted from ceiling. The egg split, the sound sharp. Shockwave passing through bone. A claw emerged, glistening with molten membrane. Wings unfurled, translucent like forged ruby. Bones black. The creature's body rolled free, longer than a horse, yet slim, newborn. It bellowed a screech that shivered metal tooling. Its eyes opened, one fiery gold, the other icy blue. Gasps rippled. Jon stepped forward, instinct overriding terror. The hatchling fixed on him. Flames danced along its throat, then died in a hiss. It tilted head, scenting. Melisandre whispered, "Touch fate." Jon approached until hot breath scorched cheeks. He extended gloved hand, laid palm upon its snout. The dragon closed dual-colored eyes and exhaled, a warmth that felt like spring after endless winter. A shudder traveled its frame. When the eyes reopened, the blue had faded, overtaken by gold. The hatchling chirruped, soft, questioning. Priests erupted in exultant cries. Melisandre's triumphant gaze shone tears. Yet Tyrion noticed a fissure across the dais rim, glowing colder, not hotter, ice creeping where heat should rule. He tapped Sam, pointed. They knelt. Frost veins spread from cracks in stone, advancing toward molten channels, steam rising where they met. Sam's stomach clenched. Ice in a volcano? That's no natural counter. Jon sensed it too. He withdrew hand, turned. Unseen, a gust of frigid wind spiraled down vent shafts, extinguishing braziers. The comet's glow faded behind a storm front now rolling overhead, a wall of black clouds swirling with blue lightning. Thunder boomed, not from weather but from wing beats. Tyrion whispered, "The Night King sends his greeting." The hatchling hissed, wings flexing. Melisandre's flame orb flickered, dimmed. Frost crystallized on distant walls. One priest screamed as ice-coated feet, creeping upward. Jon lifted his voice over chaos. "Seal the vents. Stoke the hearths. We hold the heat." Unsullied sprinted to forges, dumping bellows pumped air and coal. Sparks soared. Racks of dragon glass caught stray embers, crackling. Priests chanted fiercer, arms raised. The hatchling turned, eyes flashing gold, then blue flicker, then gold again, torn between forces. Melisandre grabbed Jon's sleeve. "Take the dragon into the sky. Flee this place until heat steadies its heart. And leave the forge to freeze?" he said. The egg fulfilled prophecy. The forge is ashes already. She thrust a chain harness. Someone had prepared, expecting need, into his hands. Jon stared, realizing they intended immediate bond. Sam interjected, voice shaking. "Joe never ridden. No time." Jon slung harness over dragon's shoulders, buckled strap behind wings. Heat scalded gloves, but he forced buckles. The creature crouched, intuiting flight instinct. Jon mounted astride where spine ridges dipped. He gripped horn nubs. Muscle flexed under him. Tyrion tossed up a coil of rope, tethered to nothing. "In case you fall," he said grimly. Jon looped it round waist, ignoring irony. He glanced at Sam. "Protect Bran. Keep the city armed." Sam nodded, eyes wide. Tyrion stepped back. The hatchling spread wings. Updraft from magma-filled membranes. With a leap it launched, clearing dais, scattering priests. It rose along cavern vent, claws scraping rock. Ice vortex chased, stabbing cold daggers. Jon ducked, hugging neck. They burst from mountain mouth in plume of steam, out into night sky riven by comet's tail. Storm clouds boiled below. Lightning lit silhouettes of two undead dragons. Spiraling. The Night King rode the nearer, crown antlers sharp about a U. His blue gaze locked onto newborn rival. He spurred mount. Frost gales screamed toward them. Jon clung. The hatchling keened confusion but banked instinctively, avoiding breath of rime. Gilts of comet fire reflected on scale specks. The sky opened, vast and perilous. Below, Dragonstone's peak erupted, a vent of lava launching sheet of fire skyward, forging temporary shield. Priests on parapets hurled wildfire barrels that burst mid-air, painting green constellations against storm. The undead dragons wheeled through, but gouts scorched wing membranes, slowing. Jon urged hatchling downward. Skimming seafoam. He realized he had no saddle, no reins, only warm scales and will. Yet the creature responded to subtle shifts of weight, mind twinned by unknown bond. They darted between stone sea stacks, each taller than keep towers, luring pursuit into tight corridors. One undead dragon clipped a spire, wing tearing. It spun crashing into surf, stones shattering. But the Night King's steed remained, breath icing ocean to glaciers as it chased. Jon felt chill creeping into Hatchling's veins. Gold eyes flickered blue again. He shouted wordless encouragement, recalling lessons Daenerys once taught. Valyrian syllables meaning up, turn, fire. Perhaps memory carried through blood. He tried. Dracarys. Flames sputtered from Hatchling throat, brief, weak, yet enough to melt forming frost along muzzle. Gold returned to eyes. It climbed steep, gathering speed, soared above cloud deck into clear vault. Stars blazed like diamonds scattered on midnight velvet. The comet sliced through, a crimson knife. Night King emerged through clouds, silhouette backlit by lightning. He drew an ice spear, reared to cast. Heart pounding, Jon urged dive. Hatchling folded wings, dropped. A comet in reverse, streaking near straight down. Air roared past ears. Spear flew, missing by yards, vanishing into cloud. Jon's stomach lurched. He leveled just above wave tops, spray misting his boots. Ahead loomed the burning ring still aflame across Biting Bay, distant but reachable. If they lured the Night King over those vents again. But the hatchling flagged, wounded by cold, muscles cramping. Jon felt its panic. He scanned horizon. To starboard, the fleet now a scattering of lantern pricks heading south. To port, dragonstone battlements flickered with warfires. He considered landing near fortress where ground scorpions could aid. Yet if the Night King breached Dragonstone's defenses while the fleet still within sight, none would escape. Choice sharpened like steel. Lure enemy away and risk all on untested wings, or retreat and doom fleet to skyborne massacre. Jon thought of Daenerys beneath Long Lake, of Sansa's faith, Arya's lonely ride. He shifted posture, guiding Hatchling toward open Gulf East. Away from both fleets, into emptiness. Night King followed. They raced, dragon newborn, dragon undead, across starlit foam. Wind knifed. A distant thunderhead towered, storm leftover from their voyage south. Lightning vined its belly. Jon spoke low to Hatchling. Nonsense hymns, prayers, stark lullabies. As if soothed, it steadied. They entered the storm wall. Rain lashed, instant freeze cracking on scales. Vision narrowed to flashes. Jon tasted blood on lips. Through glare he spied an updraft column of lightning-charged air. He remembered tales of riders ascending thermal pillars to outmaneuver foes. He risked signal, leaning back, knees coaxing. Hatchling angled upward, wings straining. Behind, Night King entered storm, frost breath swirling. Lightning burst yards away, straubing Night King's face, a visage of malevolent calm. He cocked another spear. Jon urged higher. At apex of updraft, warm air met cold, whirlpool of electricity. A lightning bolt cleaved between dragons, blinding. Hatchling shuddered but broke through cloud crest. Jon glimpsed open sky above, moonlight silver. They hovered an instant on cusp of stall. Night King's steed broke cloud behind, spear raised. Jon acted on impulse born from hours with Sam's geology charts. Heated air above volatile vent pockets might birth sudden gas plumes. He scanned. There, an orange glow through cloud far below. A volcanic fumarole flaring on seabed, likely same fault line. He pitched Hatchling into dive again, headed straight for light. Cold spear whistled past, grazing his shoulder, slicing leather, drawing red line. He ground teeth, held grip. Hidden in cloud, they zigzagged downward. Static crackled across scales. The Hatchling roared, louder now, throat finding furnace inside. As glow neared, Jon smelled sulfur. He timed breath. At 200 feet above sea, they leveled. Gas plume erupted. A geyser of molten vapor torte. Jon shouted, "Dracarys!" The hatchling answered. Geyser ignited as dragonfire met vent gas, exploding into tower of flame that engulfed airspace. Night King barreled through cloud a breath later, straight into inferno. Firestorm swirled, fed by natural gas. Wildfire residue drifting from Jon's earlier blast. Blue flickered against orange, melting into blinding white. Jon's eyes seared, but he watched silhouette convulse. Undead wings blistered, membranes shredding. The Night King's scream. High, crystalline. Cut through roar. Spear shattered in his grasp. The hatchling banked away, heat buffeting. Jon's shielded face. Firestorm collapsed into rolling column. Something fell within, striking water. Massive splash. Steam geyser. Then silence but for hiss of cooling vent. Jon trembled, waiting to see shape rise again. None did. Only charred shards of bone floated amid boiling waves. No blue glare pierced surface. He exhaled a shuddering breath. The hatchling circled once, then angled northeast instinctively, perhaps sensing kin still aloft. Jon petted neck. Gold eyes gleamed, unmarred by cold. But war not ended. One corpse worm remained, host still marched. Night King perhaps slain, yet he had died before and returned. Jon needed proof. They winged toward Dragonstone. Dawn streaked horizon pink. Below, the fleet anchored in sheltered cove, sailors cheering as dragon silhouette approached. On Castle Heights, lanterns flashed signals. The hatchling landed upon Sea Dragon Tower, claws finding grip. Jon dismounted on parapet as priests converged. Melisandre's face glowed with holy awe. It has begun, she whispered. Jon raised bloodied arm. Night King fell in fire but confirmed his end. Bran, brought up by Sam, opened eyes now clear. The cord frays, but not broken. One thread remains. A shadow without body seeks new shape. He focused on Jon. Ice requires vessel. If house stands empty, it will look for another. Jon's heart plummeted. Who? Bran's gaze drifted to hatchling. Blood of dragon. Blood of dire, blood of doom, he quoted. Then he looked at Jon's shoulder where spear graze oozed. Frost rhymed wound. Jon felt cold spider inward. Tyrion's voice quavered. He marked you years ago at Hardhome. Maybe the bond endures. Jon staggered. The cold was not mere blood loss. It crawled veins with intent. The Night King's spirit, severed from corpse, searching for host. Melisandre stepped forward, eyes blazing. The fire must seal breach. Only one path remains. She drew a ritual dagger carved of volcanic glass and jade. Sacrifice King's blood to feed flame. Deny ice its vessel. Prevent rebirth. Sam shouted. No. Ghost snarled, bristling. Jon steadied, hand on Wolf's scruff. There's another way. He looked to hatchling. Gold eyes fixed on him. Fierce, loyal. Bind spirit to something already wedded to fire. Trap it where it harms none. Melisandre frowned. A prison of flame? Tyrion followed his gaze. The dragon? Risky. Spirit could corrupt creature meant to save us. Not if fire is stronger, Jon said. Dragon's heart newborn, untainted. It can devour shadow. Bran closed eyes. Searching threads. After tense beats he spoke. Possible. But price, dragon may perish or twist. And you must guide spirit during passage. It will fight. Jon studied hatchling. Better me than realm. He approached, placing wounded shoulder against hot scales. Pain flared, cold meeting heat. Vapor hissed. He felt malign presence surge, clawing. He breathed deep, summoning memories of Winterfell summers, laughter of siblings, smile of Daenerys at first flight. Warmth. He envisioned forging these memories into chains of fire, wrapping shadow tighter, forcing it along wound into scale beneath palm. The dragon roared, flame flickering between fangs. Gold eyes deepened, swirling with blue specks, then gold again. Its body convulsed, wings snapped open, furnace of breath exhaled skyward, a pillar of pure white gold flame that illuminated sea for miles. Jon's vision dimmed. He stayed connected, guiding flow, until chill left his bones. At last, Dragon's breathing slowed. Eyes stabilized, glow of molten amber. A hush fell across parapets. Bran lifted head. Thread broken. Spirit bound. Jon zagged but stood, the graze on shoulder now raw yet warm. Melisandre exhaled, awe and caution mingling. You have forged new prophecy. Tyrion coughed, voice shaky in dawn air. Prophecies rewrite themselves daily. Let's write our own before lunchtime. Jon faced companions. We load every forge with obsidian. We arm the south. And we march back north someday to finish what began. Sansa joined him, hair dawn-kissed. The realm will follow if you lead. I won't lead alone, Jon said. Eyes meeting hers. Then Tyrion's, Sam's, Grey Worm's distant silhouette, organizing troops on beach. Fire and ice together, or not at all. Below, the fleet stirred for next voyage. On parapet, a newborn dragon shook dew from wings, and loosed a cry that echoed across sky. Neither holy fire nor ice, but something new, forged by loss and courage, and the stubborn refusal of living hearts to yield. The sound carried over waves and woods and ruined keeps, announcing to every ear that heard, the war was not yet won, but the dawn was rising, and so were those who dared to claim it. Okay. Beyond Dragonstone's volcanic crown, the newly risen sun streamed across a horizon of pale rose, gilding the spires of the fortress and painting molten lines upon the waves. The infant dragon crouched atop the sea dragon tower, wings half unfurled, each translucent membrane marbled with crimson veins that pulsed in time with its heartbeat. From the battlements below, thousands of eyes watched it with equal parts awe and dread. Northern refugees rubbing their palms against the wintry breeze, unsullied standing like statues beneath salt-stained banners. Red priests rocking on their knees in wordless benediction. No one dared breathe too loudly for fear of shattering a moment that felt exquisitely fragile, as though the faintest sound might snap the tether keeping fire, faith, and fate from tumbling into chaos. Jon remained beside the hatchling, one gloved hand resting on the warm scales behind its skull. The skin of his graze still throbbed from the contact, yet its edges no longer shimmered with frost. The invasive chill had retreated, caged within the creature's furnace-hot marrow. He felt the dragon's breath rolling against his chest, tasted tin on the air as if metal smelted somewhere deep beneath flesh. Each exhale lifted steam from the tower stones. The beast was cooling, and with it, Jon's pulse slowed to a sane rhythm. When at last the ricochet of adrenaline faded, he lifted his face to the gathering crowd. Words refused to shape. None could capture the feeling of having walked to the cliff's lip of annihilation and returned with a myth on his shoulders. The hatchling angled its head. Gold irises sparkled, flecked only here and there with frozen shards of blue, reminders of the wraith that now slept inside it. The pupils widened at the swirl of gulls overhead, and for an instant Jon feared instinct might overpower whatever tenuous bond had formed. He murmured nonsense syllables, snatches of old Valyrian he half remembered from Daenerys' lessons, a lullaby once hummed by his mother's ghost in childhood dreams. The dragon huffed, flaring tiny jets of smoke, then folded wings neatly against its spine and settled. A warm rumble thrummed through its body, recognition perhaps, or mere contentment at surviving its first night. It seemed to wait for his next move. He gave it one more pat, stepped back to the parapet, and scanned the sky. Clouds still massed in ragged spirals over the bay, tinted smudges of charcoal trailing eastward, where the undead host marched beyond the horizon. The firestorm he'd wrought with vent and wildfire now smoldered as a long oval of steaming scarlet water, slowly cooling. Somewhere within that scalded stretch, the broken pieces of a pale dragon and its rider still festered. Pieces were not enough. The Night King's dark will had never required bones to walk. Jon suspected that very will now scraped at the walls of its new prison, straining against rings of living fire inside the hatchling's chest. How long would stone-born flesh hold such a thing? Hours? A day? Longer? He had to act before doubt made him hesitate. Behind him, Melisandre's slippers shuffled. The creature is stable, she assessed in a breathy murmur. But stability is only the pause between flames. Complete the ritual and the bond will harden. No more rituals, Jon said, still at half understanding. It listens already. That must do. Without the sealing rite you risk relapse. The shadow will rise again. It might. Or your rite may kill the dragon outright. He turned to her, noting how her coppery eyes reflected the newborn sun like twin coals. I swore no child, man, woman, beast, would burn in your fires again. She studied him. Something flickered across her expression. Regret, perhaps, or respect. You have walked paths the Lord of Light showed me only in dream. Very well, Jon Snow. I will not press. Blunt boots clanged over stone as Tyrion hurried up the winding stair, parchment clenched tight. Sweat plastered silver-brown hair to his temples, despite the morning chill. Reports from the fleet, he announced, voice carrying across the tower top. Every hull anchored or beached, casualties minimal once the scald tide receded. The wildfire Drummond sprung a leak, patched with sailcloth for now. Davos says it will float long enough to caulk with pine tar. Unsullied patrols ring the island. No sign of the second corpse worm since the blast. I venture the damn thing fears boiling. It fears nothing, Jon corrected softly. It calculates. Tyrion's gaze slid to the dragon, pupils dilating a fraction. And what of this? It flies by midday, Jon said. I'll scout east before the ice regroups. Scout? Tyrion lifted brows. You intend to saddle that lizard after one evening? One morning? Jon glanced downward. The dragon's body remained motionless, curled loosely like a cat, sunning itself on warm stone. A horse will throw you quick enough after a night in the stall. Best to break it before breakfast. Tyrion managed a smile that wobbled. I have breakfast wagers with myself about how many bones you'll break in the attempt. Then hold a quill, Jon replied without humor. He faced the courtyard below. Pikes glittered where Unsullied drilled near the steaming pools that ringed Dragonmon's base. Northern smiths hammered at portable anvils, turning dragon glass spearheads until their fingers bled. Children lugged buckets from springs, sloshing water across cobblestones to keep sparks from catching stray straw. Everywhere, the fortress sang with industry, saws and hammers and clanging hooves as stable hands reshod half-frozen horses. The memory of Winterfell's forges, now silent under ice, knifed his heart, but he could not linger on ghosts. A summons reached him before he descended. Sansa flagged from lower rampart, hair whipping in wind as she beckoned. Leaving the dragon to soak brand-new sunlight, he followed a spiral stair that opened onto a narrow postern walk. She met him halfway, expression taut. Raven from King's Landing, she said without greeting. 3 wings arrived overnight, though the birds were too exhausted to fly farther. The maester thawed the scrolls this morning. She handed a roll of vellum sealed with a golden hand, the symbol of the royal regent. Jon read quickly. Stannis Baratheon had died years past, yet the parchment named a new king, Tommen. No, Tommen was gone. Cersei had proclaimed herself queen. The letter, scrawled in urgent red, bore neither her lions nor the stag. Instead, it carried the personal sign of Grand Maester Gillamore, appointed in whatever chaotic shuffle followed the last coronation. Stilted sentences confirmed what rumors only whispered. Cersei's hold on the Iron Throne had splintered when food riots overwhelmed King's Landing. The gold cloaks now answered to a council of merchants and faith militant officers. With winter famine strangling the capital and the sudden rumor of an ice-born army racing down the heartlands, the city pleaded for any alliance that could ferry provisions or support. Yet deeper into the missive, another tremor. Euron Greyjoy, restless without dragons to hunt at sea, had redirected the Iron Fleet south. 200 ships anchored off the gullet, blockading the Blackwater. Cut off from Reach Grain by land and from Essos by water, King's Landing would fall, as much to starvation as to whites, unless Yara's indecisive captains joined the blockade. "Bastards bluff," Tyrion said when Jon passed him the scroll. "Euron senses weakness, nothing more. But he can choke half the realm if he strangles that river mouth." "Then?" Sansa's fingers twitched around a second parchment. "There's more. A separate raven. Look." This seal bore a rose encircling a broken sword. Jon lifted brow. It was the private crest of Lady Olenna before her death. The note, shorter, more candid, had been penned by Margaery Tyrell, presumed dead after the Sept explosion but evidently alive and hiding at Bitterbridge. The Reach, it claimed, had closed ranks behind her younger brother, a lad named Loras, who was rumored to be recovering from wounds once thought fatal. The Tyrell scions amassed harvest stores behind Oakhart walls, yet refused to break west to assist King's Landing, while Euron's Krakens prowled. Instead, they offered safe haven to northern refugees, provided a Stark or Snow presented living proof of White Walkers to their assembly of lords. They proposed meeting on neutral ground, the ruin of Harrenhal. Tyrion let out a quiet groan. "Of all castles, Harrenhal, we might as well parley in the maw of Balerion himself." "They choose symbolism," Sansa answered, voice steady though her jaw flexed. "Fire melted those towers once. They hope to see ice melted now." "Bah." Jon rubbed stubble along his jawline. "We cannot split armies again. White Harbor cost us dearly, but we must secure harvest grain. The child inside that egg," he corrected himself, "the dragon on the roof, buys us leverage, not to threaten the Reach, but to prove our vow." "Who attends Harrenhal then?" Tyrion asked. "Not me," Jon said. "My presence belongs in the air, harrying the dead. I'll fly northwest to gauge the host's advance and keep the dragon's blood hot with skirmish. Sansa leads the delegation south." Her eyes widened. "May, you speak with the grace they understand," he said. "And you will have Arya in the shadows." He looked at Bobby. His sister, the assassin, had not returned from her ride. Somewhere across the wilderness she slid among whites like wind between reeds. He willed her safe. Tyrion half smiled. "If Harrenhal falls mid-summit, it will feel almost nostalgic." Sansa straightened, shoulders aligning with invisible mantle of authority. "Very well. Send Gendry to row us upriver. Davos can navigate the gullet. Yara's ships will break Euron's blockade or stand aside. And I will deliver proof." She nodded toward the tower where the dragon perched. "With scales in my satchel, if nothing else." Jon traced dry blood at his collar. "Take the Maester's record of Winterfell's fall, and Bran's map of the host. If the lords doubt your words, show them the swarm moving closer each time the ink dries." "Done." She pivoted, descended the stair. Her cloak flapped behind like a banner reclaimed. Tyrion lingered. "And me?" "You accompany her," Jon said. "Your coin counts and cynicism keep sharper blades at bay." "Joy," Tyrion muttered. "Back through the Riverlands I fled years ago. At least I know the taverns." He turned to go, then hesitated, expression softening. "Don't die before I return?" he added almost shyly. "It would spoil my investments." Jon clapped his shoulder. "See you in King's Landing, imp." Tyrion grimaced at the name, old wounds still raw, but managed a nod. Preparations devoured the next hours. Melisandre oversaw the carving of saddle plates from cured elk hide, shaped to the hatchling's backbone and lashed with brass rings hammered into bone ridges. Jon refused an iron helm. Weight would hinder his gaze, yet accepted bracers padded with wyvern hide offered by a Corthine smith. Sam insisted on sewing a small satchel of parchments to his belt. Maps of East Coast waterways, quick sketches of night, king troop paths gleaned from Bran's whispers. Ghost followed every step, tail flicking, eyes never leaving the dragon. Before noon the sky cleared entirely. An omen or simple meteorology, none knew. A ramp had been built from stacked crates, allowing Jon to vault into makeshift saddle. The dragon accepted the added leather with minimal complaint, though occasional tail flicks dented parapet stones. When final strap cinched, Jon settled surprisingly low between wing joints. Heat radiated through cloak and hauberk, warming muscles knotted from sleepless nights. Grey worms strode out, spear capped with obsidian gleaming. He saluted. "Hold sky until our blades meet you on the ground," he said, then turned to instruct Unsullied to open the tower yard. Jon twisted in saddle, nodding to Davos far below. The Onion Knight raised a lantern of green-tinted glass, the signal that the wildfire Drammen had been resealed, and volunteers stood ready. Yara, on a nearby quay, stamped a boot on Kraken's Kissus railing, spurring her oarsmen to chant a rowing cadence that rolled across water. "Break the black, burn the ice!" Children echoed the refrain from balconies. Melisandre lifted palms skyward and began a soft hymn in High Valyrian. Less forceful than her usual incantations. Almost gentle, the priests joined in flowing counter-melodies. The air vibrated. Jon closed his eyes, breathing once, twice, fighting old panic of crow wing first flights across wall. He leaned forward, whispered, "Sovus, rise, dot you." The dragon crouched, wings sweeping out. Canvas of ruby shot through with sun. With a muscular bound it cleared tower rim, talons chiseling stone edges as it launched into open sky. Wind tore Yon's hood back, ripping breath from lungs. They surged upward, higher than even Drogon had lifted him before. Air thinned. Sea receded into roiling topaz flecked with drift ice. The fortress of Dragonstone shrank to a black claw. Ships circling like silver minnows. Jon risked a glance downward. Grey worm spears glimmered. Sansa's hair in the keepyard shone copper. He tapped heel against scale, the slightest nudge, and the dragon banked northeast, wing beats thrumming. It seemed to read his intent with eerie ease. Perhaps the wraith within passed glimpses of his thoughts through flickering vein. They cut across shorelines where pine forests bowed beneath weight of rime crystals. Here and there, clusters of refugees tramped south along goat tracks. Tiny lines of ant-like movement. Jon's chest tightened. He'd thought White Harbor drained the north, but there were always more souls huddling behind the next ridge. He noted coordinates. He would send ships or ravens. After an hour he glimpsed the white edge of the ice road still drifting south, patched but not entirely broken. Giant shapes trudged upon it, pulling siege towers carved of frozen trunks. The second corpse worm circled overhead, shepherding progress with blasts of powdery frost. But even at this distance, Jon saw tears along the undead dragon's wings, where wildfire had scorched membrane. Each flap labored. It had not yet healed. Opportunity. He urged his own dragon lower, skimming wave tops, steam curling where hot breath met brine. They came upon the road's western flank where smaller scouts had wandered toward a coastal village, perhaps smelling life. Jon spotted survivors barricaded in half-collapsed cottages. Ildren, dot. He felt an old fury. A guttural command, Dracarys, ripped from his throat before he decided. The hatchling's chest ballooned. A tongue of orange-white fire burst, longer and hotter than the sputter of dawn. It swept the flank of whites, turning them to brittle statues that shattered before they even toppled. The wave of heat cracked the nearest span of ice, fracturing it into shards that rocked, then sank. Refugees inside cottages stared up, stunned. Jon wheeled, calling out, "Ride south, Dragonstone or the seas beyond, run!" Whether they heard his rasp above surf, he couldn't know. But many stumbled into daylight and began to scramble away. The corpse worm's screech cut the sky. Predator marking new rival. It banked, massive wings wailing. Jon braced for pursuit, but the undead beast faltered, twisting mid-air as though confused by the hatchling's dual essence. Its own master's presence diffused inside this living shell. The delay allowed Jon to dive, breaking line of sight behind cliffs. He pressed onward, circumventing the host's vanguard and angling north inland. He wanted numbers, composition, speed. Through patchwork breaks in cloud he counted at least 30 giants, 3 mammoths stitched with chains, countless foot soldiers. More chilling, among ranks shuffled new shapes, white bears whose shoulders towered over spear tips, and reanimated krakens whose tentacles froze water to ropey whips as they dragged across land. The Night King's experiments. The hatchling vibrated with a growl at sight of those creatures, as though memory of its own capture flickered. Jon marked distances against Sam's maps. At current pace, the vanguard would reach Blackwater rush in under a week, even with broken ice. King's Landing would not have 7 days' provisions. If Sansa's embassy failed, 1 million civilians would perish trapped between Kraken blockade and winter death. He banked south. Afternoon sunlight dimmed behind sullen lid of clouds. They skimmed tree line near the ruins of Maidenpool, long since burnt by Ironborn. Scavenger wights nosed through char residue. Small packs cut from the main host. He incinerated clumps swiftly, conserving flame to keep muscles warm. It was near dusk when he glimpsed columns of smoke rising from the Trident Valley, and not the gray of battle pyres, but black, thick, tar-rich. He guided the dragon closer. There lay Harrenhal. Melted towers, curtain walls fractured by centuries of stasis, all bathed now in haze of fresh industry. Portable forges ringed the Godswood clearing. Banners of Tyrell roses, Manderley mermen, and stark direwolves flew side by side. Sansa's expedition had beaten schedule. He circled once, allowing watchers to recognize silhouette. Trumpets sounded faint. He considered landing, deliver news of the host's speed. But shadows crowded edges. Too little time. He instead loosed a fireburst into the sky. A comet's flare, then angled south. Whoever watched would know it, signaled urgency. Night dropped its veil fully by the time surf glistened again beyond river mouths. The hatchling grew sluggish, wings new to such endurance. Jon sought a lonely spit of rock. Landed. He slid down numb legs. Spread bedroll near Dragon's warmth. Ghost leapt from saddlebag. He had stowed the direwolf there mid-morning rather than leave him in keep, and padded circles until curling at Jon's feet. Together, they watched stars emerge. Jon removed Sam's satchel. Scratched lines on parchment. Host position, undead beast damage. Host ETA Blackwater 5 days. He tied note to Ghost's collar. To Dragonstone, he instructed. The wolf whined but nuzzled him, turned, and bounded into darkness. Ghost would reach fortress in hours by land leaps. Jon leaned against scale plates, eyelids sagging. Melisandre's words replayed. The bond unsealed invites relapse. He glanced toward Dragon's throat. Steady glow of inner furnace flickered gold. No hint of frost. Yet as he drifted into half-sleep, he felt a gradual tug at his thoughts. Cold presence not wholly banished, just dimmed. The wraith pressed against bars, probed his mind through the link. He erected memory walls. Scenes of Winterfell's Godswood, Bran's laugh as a boy. Arya chasing him with snowballs. The ice recoiled, repelled. For now. He slept. 3 days passed in rhythm of fire and flight. At dawn of each he scouted, burning pockets of whites isolated from main army. At dusk he returned to Dragonstone long enough to deliver maps to Davos, coordinate refugee barges heading for Storm's End. Refill satchel with smoked eel and oatcakes. Though weary, the hatchling grew stronger daily, flame hotter and more controlled. Jon named it Emberfall, after the shower of cinders that had accompanied its birth, though sailors quickly shortened to Ember for shouts across rigging. On the 4th morning, Ghost arrived panting at Dragonstone's gate, with a fresh scroll tied to his scruff. Handwriting in smooth loops announced, Harrenhal Accord signed. Tyrell grain to sail on green tide, escorted by Kraken's Kiss and 6 longships. Baratheon garrison to break Euron blockade from land, marching west with truce host of 2,000 Rose Knights and Manderley foot. Meet us at Hayford or the Rush. Says. A second slip, more cramped, was from Arya. Euron plots attack on Grainfleet. Saw his ravens. I will clip his beak. Tell Jon not to worry. Keep Ghost white for my return." Jon's relief warred with worry. Euron remained cunning. Still, progress. By evening, Davos newly caulked Drummond and 4 whalers loaded with obsidian arrowheads set sail for Storm's End, carrying Sam, Bran, and a cadre of red priests whose fire spells might strengthen the castle's ancient warding glyphs. Jon parted from them on beach, pressing Sam's hand. "Guard him," he said of Bran. Sam nodded, spectacles fogging with emotion. Davos winked. "Storms won't bother me. Served a king named Stannis once, remember?" Night fell purple. Jon rose atop Emberfall again, alone now save for Melisandre's distant silhouette on parapet, eyes shining. She had spoken little since refusing second right. Something burdened her far beyond prophecy. He suspected the cost of magic weighed each day heavier. They soared over Blackwater Bay before dawn, intending to survey Euron's blockade. Ships studded water like tiny nails, dark hulls joined by tarred chains, a grisly necklace across the gullet. Torches glittered. Jon angled to keep distance. If his dragon came within scorpion range, the blockade might pounce prematurely. He observed pattern of patrols, talent of lookouts. Many sails drooped slack. Sailors drunk or ill from long idleness. But one vessel near the center gave him pause. Silence, Euron's flagship, larger than tales told, deck bristling with iron spike masts, each tip crowned by the flayed heads of men and women. Jon's stomach rolled. At prow stood a figure cloaked in squid ink black, arms outstretched as though conducting sea's own choir. Around his neck glowed a pendant of carved bone, rund concentric rings pulsing faint cobalt. Jon realized with a chill. An artifact stolen from the ruins of Valyria perhaps, one that thrummed with similar magic to the Night King's spear. Euron sought to trap the wind, or worse, to lure the corpse worm south for his own. Ember hissed. Sensed malevolence. Jon considered a lightning strike of fire but retreated. One dragon alone could not burn an entire fleet without risking a lucky scorpion shot. He memorized chain placements and sailed on. By midday he banked inland, following the Roserad. Refugee wagons escorted by Manderly cavalry trundled between hedges. Smoke rose from Hayford, keep where Sansa's banner now flew. He spotted her on battlements speaking with a gaunt man in green and gold cloak. Sir Loras Tyrell, perhaps. She looked older, stronger, the set of her shoulders reminiscent of their mother. He landed. Tyrell nights started at Ember's appearance, but Sansa held up a hand and calm spread like balm. She met him near the gatehouse. Famine inside King's Landing is worse than letters claimed, she reported before he could speak. 300 died yesterday in bread riots. The faith militant has closed the Great Sept, blaming sin for winter. Gold cloaks desert nightly. If we can't break the blockade, the city collapses before the dead arrive. Jon relayed what he'd seen of Euron. Loras swore colorfully, fist clenching around reins of his mare. Our green-handed admiral won't risk ramming those chains. Then chain cutters, Jon answered. He beckoned 2 Manderly smiths. Within an hour, they produced sketches of weighted dragonglass blades that could be slung beneath Ember's talons, sawing through links with molten heat. Loras volunteered a dozen knights to ride rowboats under chain coverage, armed with grappling hooks, ready to yank sections once weakened. Plans hammered into place. They dispatched ravens to Davos' approaching fleet. Meanwhile, Jon lifted again before dusk, scouting King's Landing from afar. Smoke vents across rooftops, but not from chimneys. Burning refuse, corpses, barricades at every alley mouth. The Red Keep's towers glowered. No banners flew except a single rag of crimson lion, torn and barely clinging. Inside, Cersei might still cling to throne, or have been devoured by her own. Hard to know. He withdrew to forests for rest. On the 5th day, storm clouds amassed, harbingers of the true front dragging south with white host. Jon met Davos' grain convoy at the mouth of Windwater, guiding them by air around shoals. With sea swell rising, they anchored at dusk behind Storm's End's towering curtain. Bran oversaw unloading from a wicker chair on parapet, eyes milky. He raised one shaking finger toward the horizon. "The ice wind breaks tomorrow," he murmured. "Be on the water by dawn or drown in hail." Davos grunted. "Drowned men I've ferried before. Ice drowned? New fish. Memsau." All night, they barreled casks of grain, sacks of barley, crates of dragonglass into Storm's End vaults, while small folk cooked urgent stews to feed sailors. Jon caught scant sleep leaning against Ember's warm flank inside an old trebuchet pit. He considered writing final letters. Sansa, Arya, Sam. But tore pages blank. Words felt futile. In violet pre-dawn, he and Loras cutters, plus Yara's chosen raiders, set forth along the coast disguised by sea mist. Ember glided overhead, tail skimming spume, hidden save for brief silhouettes between waves. Jon's heart hammered not from fear but grim resolve. The blockade must shatter. They reached Gullet entrance as sun-blooded horizon. Silence and its sister Kraken ships idled, crews yawning. On a high spar, Euron nursed wine, conversing with severed head whose jaw flapped in wind. Yara's longships feinted from north, catapults launching barrels of burning pitch at distant Kraken outriders. The Iron Fleet answered, pivoting to engage. Chains across channel tightened like cords on a bow, closer to snapping. Amid confusion, Jon dove. Ember's talons gripped first dragonglass blade. Molten glow spread across metal. They sliced through chain at western anchor. Knights in rowboats rode madly under pit shadow, grappling the glowing link and dragging it deeper, until water's buoyancy pulled segments under. At eastern end, scorpion bolts arced toward Ember, but sailors' aim faltered in dawn glare. A single tip grazed wing membrane. Ember shrieked, but held flight. They carved half through second link. Below, Loras and his mad volunteers clawed ropes, hacking at molten metal with spears. It gave, chains slackened, sagged, then plunged. Swirling foam. Silence's deck erupted with shouts. Euron roared curses, wheeled his prize catapult. He loaded a bolt, tipped in that eerie cobalt rune bone. He sighted. Jon's skin prickled. Frost inside Ember's marrow stirred, drawn to artifact's call. Wing beats faltered. Jon whispered every warm memory he held. Ned's smile, Daenerys' laugh, Arya's smirk. Sam's loyalty. Sansa's starlit singing. He thrust them through their link like red-hot irons. Ember leveled, regained strength. The catapult fired. Bolt streaked, trailing blue sparks. It missed by a hair, skewering empty sky. It struck water, froze a pillar that shattered. Yara's flagship surged, ramming a Kraken vessel. Ironborn did ironborn, axes clanging. Chaos blossomed. Jon wheeled for final pass. Breath burned throat. Ember spat continuous flame, a sheet of living magma across mid-fleet. Masts ignited, tarred rigging curled like snakes. Euron's manic laughter cut through roar. He tossed aside empty catapult, drew crossbow of weirwood limbs. "Come, bastard," he bellowed, arms spread. Jon considered. Killing Euron could open Gullet fully, but scorpions still dotted decks. Risk too high. He guided Ember upward, banking toward open sea. Yara's rowboat signaled success. Chains down. Grain fleet ghosted through gap, sails already full of wind. Euron cursed, gestures impotent. Jon loosed farewell breath of flame across Silence's quarterdeck, burning wine barrels that exploded. He saw Euron vanish behind boiling smoke. Grain convoy glided past. King's Landing bells rang faint in distance, mingled with hungry cheers rising from slums as sails appeared. But triumph remained brittle. Beyond the hazy northern horizon a dark band advanced. The Night King's army. Still 5 leagues north of Rush River, but now spurred by something unseen. Bran's warning earlier echoed. The wind breaks tomorrow. Tomorrow was here. At sundown, Jon stood with Sansa on Hayford's outer wall, watching grain wagons roll toward King's Landing under Tyrell guard. Hungry small folk lined roadsides already, singing praises to the Wolf Queen. Sansa flushed, but accepted the title with calm nods. "I'll escort the first column inside," she told him. "Present proof to whatever government still claims the throne. With luck we pivot the city's garrison outward and man the northern palisades before the host arrives. Take ember scales and a dragonglass spear point," Jon urged. "Trust little, verify everything. And you?" "I fly to the Trident Crossing. We must hold them at the river, or we're fighting in the city streets." He rubbed aching temples. "If Arya returns, send her north. She excels in chaos." Sansa smiled faintly. "We all do these days." They parted. Jon mounted Ember outside gates lit by braziers, made from old sepulchre doors. He cast one last look at red-streaked sky. The comet still burned, though fading behind squalls. With a flex of wings, they soared. Night concealed fields chewed by frost. Somewhere below, Arya stalked Euron's camps perhaps, or Sam prepared last stand spells, or Tyrion rewrote speeches for rebellious lords. But in the lofty hush, only wind and heartbeat accompanied Jon. He realized he no longer feared the dragon beneath him. He trusted it, as he once trusted ghosts in forests. The wraith inside had grown quiet, either lulled or listening. He spoke aloud to it. "See what life is," he said, voice snatched by gusts. "Not just cold or fire. It's blood, and laughter, and stubborn fools refusing to kneel." He didn't know if the shadow heard or cared, but he felt lighter saying it. They reached the Trident just before dawn. Mist hugged water. River ice groaned along banks, but central current still flowed swift. On south side, Manderley engineers erected barricades, pointed stakes, trenches, cartwheels packed with pitch waiting to be lit. On north bank, emptiness. He landed by a ring of torches where Davos conferred with Loras, and a grim man bare islanders called Harma. "River's absolute last line," Davos explained. "If we can hold until sun sets, we finish torch lines and trap them in dead zone." Jon surveyed supplies, sturdy yet numbers scrawny. Perhaps 3,000 fighters, many raw peasants armed with kitchen knives. They needed reinforcements. He thought of King's Landing garrison, Tyrell riders, Baratheon spears at Storm's End. He sent ravens, but ravens might not beat marching dead. Noon died too. Scouts returned pale. Vanguard visible at ridge. Giants, mammoths, corpse worm above, wounded but furious. Jon rallied archers, placed scorpions along south bank to cover burned hulks anchored midstream. He spent afternoon mapping fallback signals. If left flank buckled, blue flares. If right, green. Bran's absence felt like missing compass, but he trusted the boy's foresight wherever he huddled behind wards. Dusk bled red like memory of the comet. Snow began, thin, swirling, carried on wind that stank of tombs. Jon donned helm this time, though visor hindered vantage. He mounted Ember, who rumbled anticipation. When the Night King's army appeared atop ridge, silence fell. Between drifts the white shapes massed, endless like surf about to crash. The corpse worm shrieked, sound razor-sharp, dull wind. On its back sat no rider. The beast now guided by residual will alone, searching for Master's echo inside Ember. Jon inhaled slow. "Not today," he whispered. He signaled scorpion crews ready. Torches along trench ignited, lines of oil catching, wicks hissing. Night painted everything silver. The first wave of whites cascaded down slope. Giants thundered behind, each footstep rattling shields. Jon loosed Ember into sky. Flames rained upon leading edge. Bodies cartwheeled burning. Yet fire alone could not stop tide forever. As charred corpses fell, others clambered over them. River ice thickened with each breath of the corpse worm. Parts of current began to slow, swirling into slush. Manderley archers sent volleys of dragonglass, felling skeletons like straw. Davos men lit pitch wheels and rolled them into slush. Oily infernos carved channels. Still, the dead pressed. A giant carrying a mammoth femur as club crashed through barricade on far right. Jon darted downward, Ember's claws extended. They struck Giant's head. Flame burst, skull melted, yet not before club swept upward. Impact slammed ebony plate. Jon flew from saddle, tumbled across frozen mud, died. Whirled. Spun. He gasped, tasted iron. Above, Ember shrieked, circling to shield him. He staggered behind a cart, gulped clarity. No time. He vaulted back onto Dragon as it skimmed low. Pain lanced through ribs, but he clenched. The corpse worm now hovered above mid-river, blasting ice path. Whites poured onto forming bridge. Scorpions loosed bolts. A few struck but fractured. Ember dove, jaws opening. Flame met Frost mid-air, clashing, swirling into white-hot steam cloud that shattered bridge section. Ice Whites plunged, but more replaced them. Jon glimpsed shape on far ridge, armored figure on skeletal horse. Not Night King, but Lieutenant, Walker of Cold Crystal. It raised glaive, gesturing. Two more giants joined, rolling siege towers on wheels of rib bone. At Joan's order, Loras men fired grapnels into towers, yanked to break wheels. One tower toppled, but the second found traction over corpses, nearing river. Jon signaled Davos. Wildfire Drummond anchored upriver launched barrel via trebuchet. It sailed arcs of green fire smashing tower. Explosion rocked ice. But the corpse worm surged through cloud, ramming Ember. The two dragons locked, tumbling. Jon clutched spikes, whirled turning sideways. He glimpsed frost spreading from undead claws along Ember's wing. The bond inside quaked. Wraith struck bars, seeking freedom to its kin. Jon closed eyes, reached inward, felt cold tendril in Dragon's heart, then his own. He spoke within mindland images. Winterfell Weirwood, fireside with ghost at his feet, Daenerys whispering he would break the wheel. He forged them into molten chains again, binding Wraith. Forcing it outward, at contact point. Ember's wing erupted in flame. Frost retreated. They wrenched free. He spurred a climbing spiral. At apex, he steered into dive. Speeds building. Corpse worm reoriented, inhaled frost. At last second Jon pulled up. Ember's tail lanced forward like scythe, sweeping across undead dragon's throat. Dragonglass scales embedded along tail ridge, added that morning by smiths, sliced bone. Blue fire gushed, a fell light. The worm's screech cut short as head separated just above shoulders, tumbling into rapids. Body convulsed, slammed water, shattering ice road. Waves spumed. The army stalled, lost its aerial shepherd. Without frost breath, river current reclaimed shards. Slush parted, dragging whites downstream. Yet giants still pounded. Jon signaled blue flare for left flank break. But archers running low. He guided Ember along bank, torching siege ladders. Giants slung boulders, but Ember danced between barrages. One giant slipped on muddy blood, toppling onto own ranks, crushing dozens. At last, near midnight, horns of Tyrell cavalry sounded southward. Loras had ridden round, leading charge of 300 heavy knights across ford upstream where ice still thin. They smashed into undead flank, releasing flurries of dragonglass arrows from mounted archers. Manderly infantry surged. Whites pincered broke lines, scattering into woods. Jon watched last giant stagger, dragonglass spear jutting from eye. Then collapse. Snow eased by dawn. The field lay armored in ash and frost and bones. Fires still burned on log palisades. Survivors cheered ragged. Davos sank to knees, muttering thanks to every god. Loras grinned, hair matted red. But North Ridge still teemed, reserves ready for daybreak assault. Without aerial support, they hesitated, but they would advance once ice thickened again. Jon breathed ragged. Ember landed beside him, exhausted, wing nicked but functional. The golden eyes met his, worryingly flecked with blue once more. He stroked snout. "Rest," he whispered. Sansa's raven arrived by mid-morning. King's Landing gates opened for grain. Council accepted Stark proof. Gold cloaks under Sir Balon Swan pledged to hold battlements with Manderly reinforcements. Faith Militant agreed to distribute bread. But Cersei vanished, last seen heading to cellars with Lannister guards. Unclear where. Good enough for now. On battlefield, Sam arrived, astride a pony. Red Priest escort. He dismounted, offered water. Jon guzzled, then realized Sam's eyes brimmed. Bran's vision. Sam gasped. The spirit. They call it the Great Other. We'll try one final host at the place where fire first forged dragons. Valyrian mines beneath Dragonmont shook tonight. Melisandre says tremors are birth pangs. If the shadow escapes Ember, it goes there. Jon stared. Then Dragonstone is next front. Sam nodded. And that fortress is emptied. Only priests remain. Jon looked at Ember, sleeping uneasily amid broken war machines. Across river, whites regrouped, waiting for frost cover. There was no time to finish them. Battle would drag days. He approached Davos and Loras. Hold river. Sansa will fortify city. I must fly south again. Then Davos lifted brow. Alone? Ghost will come. He looked to treeline. The direwolf emerged, muzzle stained with ice. He finds me. Loras saluted. We duel death while you duel gods. Fair trade. Jon mounted, pain forgotten. He leaned into Ember's neck, whispered. Home. They lifted, crossing dawn-gold sky. Below, the world still burned and froze. But somewhere ahead, awaited a volcano beating like a heart of the realm. The place he must solder shadow to stone forever, or let winter swallow kingdoms. As they vanished into sun-hazed distance, the first true spring lark of the long night dared a tentative song across the ravaged Trident plain. None could say whether it sang hope or requiem, but its notes rose, fragile and clear, carried southward on warming air beyond the dragon's wake.